He broke into a warehouse to save a woman. Later, he learned she was a billionaire CEO. What started as one desperate night in the rain became a collision between two worlds that should never have met. This is a story about courage, redemption, and the moment when doing the right thing changes everything. Stay with me until the end to see how this unfolds, and comment with your city name so I can see how far this story travels across the world. The rain came down like God himself was trying to wash the sins off the industrial district. But Ryan Hale knew better. Some stains don't come out, no matter how hard the sky cries. He stood in the doorway of his garage, Hale's Auto Repair, watching the water turn the cracked asphalt into a river of oil and regret. It was past midnight on a Tuesday, which meant the world had mostly given up and gone to bed. But not Ryan. Sleep was something other people did, people who didn't wake up at 3 in the morning reaching for someone who wasn't there anymore. He pulled the collar of his worn jacket tighter against his neck and reached for the pull chain on the garage door. The metal rattled and groaned as it descended, the sound swallowed almost immediately by the downpour. His truck sat in the lot, a 2008 Ford F-150 that had seen better days but still ran like a dream because Ryan Hale fixed what was broken. It was what he did. It was all he knew how to do anymore. The firefighter thing, that was another life. 5 years ago, he'd worn the uniform with pride, ran into burning buildings while everyone else ran out, saved lives, and made his daughter think he was a superhero. Then came the warehouse fire on 5th and Madison. Then came the collapse. Then came the funerals. 3 of his brothers didn't make it out. Ryan did. But he left something in those flames that he never got back. Some people called it courage. He called it the ability to sleep through the night. So now he fixed cars, changed oil, replaced brake pads, listened to engines instead of screams. It was quieter this way. Safer. His daughter Emma got to keep her dad, even if that dad was a shadow of who he used to be. 7 years old and too smart for her own good, she was spending the week with her grandmother upstate, which meant Ryan had the apartment above the garage all to himself. Just him. A bottle of whiskey he kept promising himself he wouldn't open, and the sound of rain that wouldn't stop. He was 3 steps toward his truck when he heard it. A scream. Distant, muffled, barely there, but unmistakable. The kind of sound that turns your blood to ice water and makes your heart forget how to beat for just a second. Ryan froze, rain already soaking through his jacket, his hand still on his keys. For a moment, he thought maybe he'd imagined it. God knows his mind played tricks on him these days. Phantom sounds, ghost memories, the echo of voices calling for help that he'd never been able to answer fast enough. But then it came again, sharper this time, desperate. A woman's voice, raw with terror, cutting through the storm like a knife. Ryan's head snapped toward the sound, east, maybe 100 yards. The old Riverside warehouse, a massive concrete tomb that used to be a textile factory before the company went under in the 90s. Now it was just another corpse in a district full of them, windows boarded up, chain link fence falling apart. No trespassing signs that nobody bothered to read. He'd driven past it 1,000 times and never given it a second thought. Until now. His firefighter instincts kicked in before his brain could catch up. He didn't think, didn't weigh the options, didn't consider that maybe this was none of his business, that maybe he should call the cops and let them handle it, that maybe getting involved would shatter the fragile peace he'd built for himself in this quiet corner of the world. He just moved. Ryan sprinted back into the garage, his boots splashing through puddles, and grabbed the first things his hands found. A heavy-duty flashlight with a steel body that doubled as a club, and a crowbar that had pried open more than a few stubborn engine compartments. The tools felt right in his hands. Familiar. Like muscle memory from another life was waking up whether he wanted it to or not. He ran. The rain hammered him as he cut through the empty lot between his garage and the warehouse. His lungs burned. His leg, the one that still ached from where the beam had pinned him during the collapse, screamed in protest. He ignored it. The chain-link fence was a joke, sagging and torn, and he slipped through a gap without slowing down. The warehouse loomed ahead, a dark mountain of rust and decay, its walls streaked with water and graffiti that nobody would ever read. The main entrance was a massive rolling door sealed with a chain and padlock that looked newer than it should have been. That detail registered somewhere in the back of Ryan's mind. A lock that knew didn't belong on a building this dead, but he didn't stop to analyze it. He moved along the wall, flashlight cutting through the rain, until he found a side door. It was steel, windowless, and slightly ajar. Not locked, not fully closed. Someone had been here recently. Ryan pressed his back against the wall and listened. Inside he could hear voices, low, male, arguing. Then that scream again, cut short like someone had covered her mouth. His jaw tightened. His hand gripped the crowbar so hard his knuckles went white. He thought about Emma, about what he'd tell her if she asked him why he didn't help when someone needed him, about the 3 men he'd watched die because he hadn't been fast enough, strong enough, good enough, about the promises he'd made to himself in the hospital that he'd never be helpless again, that he'd never hear someone screaming and do nothing. Ryan Hale kicked the door open. The hinges shrieked. The door slammed against the interior wall with a sound like a gunshot, and Ryan stepped into the darkness with his flashlight raised and his heart pounding like a war drum. The warehouse was a cathedral of shadows. The beam of his flashlight carved through the blackness, revealing a vast space of concrete pillars and rusted machinery, everything coated in decades of dust and neglect. The ceiling stretched up into darkness, crisscrossed with metal beams and broken catwalks. Water dripped from 1,000 places, creating a symphony of hollow echoes that made it impossible to pinpoint where sounds were coming from. But Ryan didn't need to pinpoint anything, because there, in the center of the warehouse floor, under a single flickering work light hanging from a chain, was a sight that made his blood run cold. A woman, tied to a chair. She was maybe 35, slender, with dark hair plastered to her face by sweat and rain. Her clothes, what looked like an expensive blouse and slacks, were torn and dirty. There was blood on her lip, a bruise forming on her cheekbone, and her eyes, Jesus, her eyes, were wide with a terror so pure it was almost primal. When the light from Ryan's flashlight hit her face, those eyes locked onto his with an intensity that nearly knocked him backward. For a frozen second, they just stared at each other. Her, bound and bleeding. Him, standing in the doorway like some rain-soaked ghost with a crowbar in his hand. Then the moment shattered. Well, a voice said from the shadows. Looks like we got ourselves a hero. 3 men stepped into the light. Big guys, all of them. The kind who spent more time in the gym than was healthy and had the facial scars to prove they'd made poor life choices. The one who'd spoken was bald, with a neck like a fire hydrant and a gun in his hand. Not pointed at Ryan, not yet. Just there, casual, resting against his thigh like it was an extension of his arm. The other 2 fanned out slightly, blocking any easy path to the woman. One had a crowbar of his own, the other just cracked his knuckles, which somehow seemed worse. Ryan's mind raced, cataloging details. 3 opponents. One a firearm, probably more. The woman was maybe 20 feet away. Exit behind him, but he'd have to leave her. No way to call for help. His phone was back in the truck, and even if it wasn't, there was no time. He was outgunned, outnumbered, and out of his depth. So naturally, he opened his mouth. "Fellas," Ryan said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline screaming through his veins. "I don't know what kind of party this is, but I'm pretty sure the lady wants to leave." The bald one laughed. It was an ugly sound, devoid of any real humor. "That's so. And who the hell are you supposed to be, Captain America?" "Just a guy who heard someone screaming." Ryan's eyes flicked to the woman, then back to the men. "Thought maybe she could use some help." "Touching, really." The bald one took a step forward. "But here's the thing, hero. This ain't your business. So why don't you turn your ass around, walk back out that door, forget you saw anything, and maybe you get to see the sun come up." "Can't do that." "Why not?" "Because I'm already here," Ryan said, "and I don't leave without her." The tension in the warehouse ratcheted up about 10 notches. The man with the gun stopped looking amused. His finger slid closer to the trigger. The other 2 moved in slightly, forming a loose semicircle. Ryan could feel the weight of the moment, the knife's edge he was balanced on. One wrong word, one wrong move, and this ended badly for everyone. But he'd made his choice the second he kicked that door open. "You got about 5 seconds to reconsider," the bald one said softly. "And then we're going to paint the walls with you." Ryan looked past them, directly at the woman. Her eyes were still on his, and in them he saw something that surprised him. Not just fear, but determination. A kind of fierce will that said she hadn't given up, that she was still fighting, even tied to that chair. It reminded him of Emma, the way his daughter looked at him when she was scared but trying to be brave. That did it. Her first, Ryan said. You let her go, and we can talk about whatever the hell you want. The bald one smiled. It was the smile of a man who'd already decided how this was going to end. Wrong answer, hero. He raised the gun, and Ryan moved. 5 years since he'd been a firefighter. 5 years since he'd trained for this kind of moment. But the body doesn't forget. Muscle memory is a hell of a thing. Ryan lunged to the side just as the gun went off, the shot so loud in the enclosed space it felt like the air itself had exploded. The bullet punched into the concrete wall behind where he'd been standing, sending up a spray of dust. He didn't stop moving. Couldn't stop. Forward, low, the crowbar swinging up and around in an arc that connected with the gun hand. The bald guy howled and the weapon went flying, clattering across the concrete floor into the shadows. Ryan didn't pause to celebrate. He pivoted, bringing the crowbar around just in time to block the swing from the second man. Metal hit metal with a sound like a church bell, and the impact vibrated up Ryan's arms hard enough to numb his fingers. The third guy, Knucklecracker, came at him from the side, throwing a punch that would have taken Ryan's head off if it had connected. It didn't. Ryan ducked, felt the fist whistle past his ear, and drove his shoulder into the man's midsection. They went down together, rolling across the filthy floor, grappling like animals. Everything became noise and motion and violence. A fist caught Ryan in the ribs, driving the air from his lungs. He returned the favor with an elbow to someone's face, felt cartilage crunch, heard a scream that might have been his or might have been theirs. Someone grabbed his jacket from behind, yanking him backward, and Ryan spun, lashing out with the crowbar. It connected with something solid. Another scream. He lost track of time. Could have been 30 seconds, could have been 5 minutes. Pain bloomed in a dozen places. His knuckles split open, his lip bleeding, something wrong with his ribs on the left side. But he didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Because somewhere in the chaos, he could hear the woman screaming his name. No, not his name. She didn't know his name. Just screaming, "Help! Behind you!" And that was enough. Ryan whirled, saw the bald guy lunging for the gun where it had fallen, and knew he was out of time. He threw the crowbar. It spun end over end, a tumbling silhouette in the dim light, and caught the bald guy square in the shoulder blade. The man went down hard, the gun skittering away again, and Ryan didn't wait to see where it ended up. He ran for the woman. The chair she was tied to was industrial steel, the kind that weighed a ton, and her hands were bound behind her back with zip ties. No time to untie her, no time for anything delicate. Ryan grabbed the chair by its back and lifted, straining, his injured leg nearly giving out. The woman gasped as the chair tipped backward, and together they crashed to the floor. The impact jarred them both, but the chair legs, old, rusted, snapped on one side. "Hold still!" Ryan gasped, grabbing one of the broken chair legs and using its jagged edge to saw at the zip ties. The plastic was thick, industrial grade, and it took precious seconds that they didn't have. Behind them, he could hear the men getting back up, could hear the bald one's voice roaring orders. "Can you run?" Ryan asked, not looking up from his work. Yes, I think so." "Good, because we're about to." The zip ties finally gave way. The woman yanked her hands free and Ryan pulled her to her feet. She stumbled, her legs nearly giving out after God knows how long tied to that chair, but she caught herself against him. For a split second, they were face to face, close enough that he could see the flecks of gold in her dark eyes, could see the determination burning there alongside the fear. "Can you walk?" he asked. She looked at him, really looked at him, and he saw something shift in her expression, a decision being made. "I can run." "Then run." They ran. Behind them, the warehouse erupted into chaos. Shouts, the sound of footsteps pounding concrete. Ryan kept one hand on the woman's arm, half supporting her, half dragging her, as they sprinted for the side door. His lungs were on fire. His leg was screaming, but they were moving, and that was all that mattered. They burst out into the rain, and it hit them like a wall of ice water. The woman gasped, nearly fell, but Ryan kept her upright. "My truck," he said, pointing toward the garage. "Can you make it?" She nodded, water already streaming down her face, and they took off again. The parking lot was a minefield of puddles and potholes. Ryan's boots splashed through water that came up to his ankles. Beside him, the woman's dress shoes, completely impractical for running, kept slipping on the wet asphalt, but she didn't slow down. Behind them, the warehouse door slammed open, and voices shouted into the night. 50 yards to the truck. 40. A gunshot cracked the air, and Ryan heard the bullet whine past his ear. Too close. Way too close. He yanked the woman to the left, zigzagging, making them a harder target. Another shot. This one sparked off the asphalt 3 feet to their right. "Don't stop," Ryan shouted, though he wasn't sure if he was talking to her or himself. 30 yards. 20. The F-150 sat in the lot exactly where he'd left it, a beautiful sight covered in rain and rust. Ryan fumbled for his keys, nearly dropped them, managed to hit the unlock button. The lights flashed. The doors clicked open. "Get in!" The woman threw herself into the passenger seat while Ryan vaulted over the hood. His action movie days were definitely behind him, but adrenaline did wonderful things and landed hard on the driver's side. He jammed the key into the ignition, and the engine roared to life with a sound that was the most beautiful thing he'd ever heard. Another gunshot. This one punched through the rear window, spiderwebbing the glass but not breaking through. The woman screamed. Ryan threw the truck into reverse and floored it. They shot backward across the parking lot, tires spinning, engine howling. Ryan cranked the wheel hard, executed a turn that would have made his driving instructor weep, and slammed the transmission into drive. The truck lurched forward. He aimed them toward the street, toward the exit, toward anywhere that wasn't here. A figure appeared in front of them, the bald guy, gun raised, face twisted with rage. For a frozen instant, Ryan thought he was going to have to make a choice he didn't want to make. But at the last second, the man dove aside and the truck blew past him, hitting the street with a jolt that made both of them bounce in their seats. Ryan didn't let up on the gas. They rocketed down the empty street, the industrial district blurring past them, rain hammering the windshield so hard the wipers could barely keep up. He took the first turn, then the second, then a third, zigzagging through neighborhoods he knew by heart until he was absolutely certain no one was following them. Only then did he ease off the gas. Only then did he let himself breathe. They drove in silence for a long moment, the only sounds the rain and the engine and their own ragged breathing. Ryan's hands were shaking on the wheel. The adrenaline was draining out of him, leaving behind a hollow, trembling exhaustion that made him feel like he'd aged 10 years in the last 10 minutes. Beside him, the woman was pressed back against the passenger seat, arms wrapped around herself, shaking. Her hair was plastered to her face. Her clothes were soaked through. Blood still marked her lip, and the bruise on her cheek was darkening. But she was alive. They were both alive. "You okay?" Ryan asked, his voice rough. She didn't answer right away, just stared at him with those intense eyes, like she was trying to figure out if he was real. Finally, she nodded. "I think so. Yes. Thank you. Her voice cracked. She pressed her hands to her face. "God, I thought they were going to... Hey, it's okay." Ryan reached over, awkward, and touched her shoulder. "You're safe now, I promise. They're not going to touch you." She looked at him through her fingers, and he saw tears mixing with the rain on her face. "You don't understand. You have no idea who they are, what they're capable of." Something in her voice made Ryan's stomach tighten. "Who are they?" "It doesn't matter. They'll come after me. They'll find me." "Not tonight, they won't." Ryan checked the rearview mirror again. Nothing but empty street and rain. "Look, we need to get you to a hospital, get you checked out, and we need to call the police." "No!" The word came out sharp, almost panicked. "No police. Not yet." Ryan frowned. "Lady, I don't know what's going on here, but those guys just tried to kill us. We need to... Please." She grabbed his arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "Just not yet. Take me somewhere safe. Anywhere. I need to think. I need to..." She broke off, her breathing accelerating toward panic. Ryan had seen enough trauma in his firefighter days to recognize the signs. Shock, adrenaline crash, the moment when the brain finally catches up to what the body just survived. He pulled the truck over to the side of the road, put it in park, and turned to face her fully. "Listen to me," he said, keeping his voice calm, steady. "My name is Ryan. Ryan Hale. You're safe. I'm not going to let anything happen to you, but I need you to breathe for me, okay? In through your nose, out through your mouth. Can you do that?" She stared at him, then nodded. Her breathing was ragged, but she tried to follow his instructions. In, out, in, out. Slowly, the panic in her eyes receded. "Good," Ryan said. "That's good. Now, I'm going to take you to my place. It's just an apartment above my garage. Nothing fancy, but it's warm and dry, and no one knows about it. You can clean up. We can figure out what to do next. Sound okay?" She nodded again, not trusting her voice. "Okay." Ryan put the truck back in gear. "Hold on." They drove through the rain-soaked city, taking the long way around, doubling back twice to make sure no one was tailing them. Ryan's neighborhood was working class, the kind of place where people minded their own business and didn't ask too many questions. His garage sat on a corner lot, a squat brick building with his apartment on the second floor. He pulled the truck into the garage bay, killed the engine, and hit the button to close the door behind them. The sudden silence was deafening. "Come on," Ryan said softly. "Let's get you inside." He helped her out of the truck, she was still unsteady on her feet, and guided her to the stairs in the back of the garage. His apartment was small, just a living room, kitchen, bedroom, and bathroom, but it was clean and warm. He flicked on the lights, and the woman stood in the middle of his living room, dripping water on the hardwood floor, looking lost. "Bathroom's through there," Ryan said, pointing. "There's towels in the cabinet, and I think I've got some clothes that might fit you. They'll be too big, but they're dry. Take your time. I'll make some coffee." She looked at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then quietly, "Why did you do that?" "Do what?" "Come after me. Risk your life. You don't even know me." Ryan thought about that, thought about the scream he'd heard through the rain, thought about Emma and the 3 men who died in the fire, and the promise he'd made to himself to never be helpless again. "Someone needed help," he said simply. "What else was I supposed to do?" The woman's eyes filled with tears again, but this time there was something else in them, something that looked almost like wonder. She opened her mouth, closed it, then just nodded and disappeared into the bathroom. Ryan stood alone in his living room, dripping rain onto his own floor, and realized his hands were still shaking. He looked down at them, bruised knuckles, split skin, blood that wasn't all his, and felt the weight of what had just happened start to settle on his shoulders. He just assaulted 3 men, possibly killed one of them with that crowbar throw, and kidnapped a woman who was clearly involved in something way above his pay grade. The smart thing would have been to call the cops the second he heard that scream. The safe thing would have been to mind his own business. But Ryan Hale had stopped doing the smart, safe thing 5 years ago when he'd run into a burning building knowing it might collapse on him. Some habits, it seemed, died hard. He walked into the kitchen, his leg aching with every step, and started making coffee. Behind him, he heard the shower turn on. And outside, the rain continued to fall, washing away the blood and the tire tracks and any evidence that tonight had ever happened. But Ryan knew better. This wasn't over. Whatever he'd just walked into, whatever nightmare that woman was running from, it was just beginning. And as he stood there in his small kitchen, listening to the water run and the rainfall, Ryan Hale made himself a promise. Whatever came next, whatever storm was about to hit, he wouldn't run from it. He'd stopped running 5 years ago. He wasn't about to start again now. The coffee maker gurgled and hissed, filling the small kitchen with a familiar warmth that felt almost obscene given what had just happened. Ryan stood at the counter, his wet clothes clinging to his skin, watching the dark liquid drip into the pot like it was the most important thing in the world. Maybe it was. Maybe focusing on something as mundane as coffee was the only thing keeping him from falling apart. His hands had finally stopped shaking, but the adrenaline hangover was setting in hard. Every muscle in his body felt like it had been put through a meat grinder. His ribs screamed with each breath, probably bruised, maybe cracked. The cut on his knuckles had stopped bleeding, but it throbbed in time with his heartbeat. And his leg, the one that never quite healed right after the collapse, felt like someone had driven railroad spikes through the bone. But he was alive. They were both alive. That had to count for something. The shower shut off. Ryan heard movement in the bathroom, the sound of cabinet doors opening and closing, and he realized he should probably change too. He was leaving puddles everywhere he walked, and his clothes smelled like rain and concrete dust and violence. He grabbed 2 mugs from the cabinet, poured coffee into both, and headed for his bedroom. 5 minutes later, he emerged in dry jeans and a faded navy t-shirt that had belonged to his father. His wet clothes were in a heap on the bathroom floor, and he'd done his best to clean the blood off his hands and face. The man staring back at him from the mirror had looked like a stranger. Hard eyes, jaw tight, the kind of expression he hadn't seen on his own face since his firefighting days. It was unsettling how quickly it all came back, how easily he'd slipped back into that version of himself. The woman was standing in his living room when he returned, and for a second, Ryan forgot how to breathe. She'd changed into the clothes he'd left for her, an old flannel shirt that hung past her hips and a pair of his sweatpants that she'd had to roll up several times. Her hair was damp but no longer plastered to her face, and she'd scrubbed away most of the dirt and blood. The bruise on her cheek stood out starkly against her pale skin, and there was still fear in her eyes, but something else too. A kind of steel underneath the shock. She looked fragile and fierce at the same time, and it reminded Ryan of a bird he'd once rescued after it flew into his garage window, delicate but ready to fight if it had to. "Coffee?" he offered, holding out one of the mugs. She took it with both hands, like she needed the warmth more than the caffeine. "Thank you." They stood there in awkward silence for a moment, 2 strangers bound together by violence and circumstance, neither quite sure what to say. Finally, Ryan gestured to the couch. "You should sit. You've been through hell." She moved to the couch slowly, like her body was still catching up to the fact that it was safe to relax. Ryan took the armchair across from her, wincing as his ribs protested the movement. Her eyes caught it. "You're hurt," she said. "I've had worse." "That's not an answer." Ryan shrugged. "I'll live. What about you? Did they—" He hesitated, not sure how to ask the question. "Did they hurt you before I got there?" She took a sip of coffee, her hands trembling slightly. "They hit me, when I wouldn't tell them what they wanted to know. But nothing worse than that." Her voice was steady, but barely. "If you hadn't come when you did—" "But I did," Ryan said firmly. "And you're here now. That's what matters." She looked at him over the rim of her mug, and he could see her trying to figure him out. "You don't even know my name." "No," Ryan admitted. "I don't. You want to tell me?" Another pause. She was weighing something, making calculations he couldn't begin to guess at. Finally, she set down her coffee and met his eyes directly. "Victoria. My name is Victoria Langford." The name meant nothing to Ryan. Should it have? The way she said it, with that slight hesitation, like she was testing to see if he'd recognize it, maybe it was supposed to mean something. But Ryan had spent the last 5 years with his head buried in engine blocks, and his world shrunk down to a 2-mile radius around his garage. He didn't keep up with current events, didn't follow business news, didn't care about anyone rich or famous enough to make headlines. "Nice to meet you, Victoria," he said. "Wish it was under better circumstances." Something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe, or relief. "You really don't know who I am?" "Should I?" "Most people would." Ryan shrugged again. "I'm not most people." A ghost of a smile touched her lips, there and gone so fast he almost missed it. "No, I'm beginning to see that." She picked up her coffee again, wrapping her hands around the mug like it was an anchor. "I owe you an explanation." "You don't owe me anything." "I do. You saved my life. You have a right to know what you walked into." Ryan wanted to argue, to tell her that it didn't matter, that she could just rest and they'd figure everything out in the morning. But the look in her eyes stopped him. She needed to tell this story, needed to say it out loud, maybe to make sense of it herself. "Okay," he said quietly. "I'm listening." Victoria took a deep breath, and when she spoke, her voice was stronger, more controlled, like she was putting on armor made of words. "I'm the CEO of Langford Industries. We're a manufacturing conglomerate. Aerospace parts, medical equipment, industrial machinery. My father built the company from nothing, and when he died 3 years ago, I took over. We employ about 40,000 people across 15 countries and generate roughly $12 billion in annual revenue. Ryan let out a low whistle. So when you said I had no idea who those guys were, they used to work for me, Victoria said, and there was something cold in her voice now, something that made Ryan sit up a little straighter. The bald one, Marcus Webb, he was head of security for our Chicago facility. Smart, capable, ex-military. I trusted him. When we started noticing irregularities in our inventory, stolen equipment worth millions, I asked him to investigate. Let me guess, Ryan said. He was the one stealing it. Not just him. He had a whole network, middle managers, warehouse workers, even some people in accounting. They'd been bleeding the company dry for years, selling proprietary parts to competitors, falsifying records, covering their tracks. By the time I figured it out, they'd stolen close to $50 million in equipment and intellectual property. Ryan's mind reeled. $50 million. He couldn't even conceptualize that much money. The most he'd ever had in his bank account at one time was $12,000, and that was back when he had a steady paycheck from the fire department. I fired them all, Victoria continued. Not just fired. I prosecuted, got the FBI involved. Webb was looking at 15 years in federal prison. The trial started 2 weeks ago. She paused, her jaw tightening. Tonight, I was working late at our satellite office on the east side. I left around 11. My driver was waiting in the parking garage, but he never made it to the car. They grabbed me before I even saw them coming. Chloroformed me, I think. When I woke up, I was in that warehouse. What did they want? Leverage? Revenge? I'm not entirely sure. Webb kept saying I should have just looked the other way, that I'd brought this on myself by being, how did he put it, an uppity bitch who doesn't know her place. The anger in her voice was sharp enough to cut glass. He was going to make an example of me. Show the world what happens when you cross him. The others, they were just muscle, following orders. Ryan felt a cold fury settle in his gut. Did you tell anyone where you were? Does anyone know you're missing? Victoria shook her head. My assistant knew I was working late, but she left at 6. My driver, God, I don't even know if he's alive. They could have killed him, and my phone is still in my car in that parking garage, assuming they didn't destroy it. She looked at him, and the vulnerability in her eyes nearly broke him. No one knows where I am, Ryan. No one is coming to look for me. Not until morning at the earliest. The weight of that settled over them both. Outside, the rain had finally started to ease up, but the night felt darker somehow, more dangerous. Those men, Ryan said slowly, they'll realize you got away. They'll be looking for you. I know. And when they find out I was the one who helped you, I know, Victoria said again, quieter this time. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. You should have just walked away. You should have... Stop. Ryan leaned forward, his voice firm. I'm not sorry I helped you. I'd do it again in a heartbeat. But we need to be smart about this. We need a plan. Victoria met his eyes, and in that moment, Ryan saw what she must be like in a boardroom, making decisions that affected thousands of lives. The fear was still there, but underneath it was something harder, sharper. The mind of someone who'd built an empire and wasn't about to let anyone take it from her. We call the police, she said. But not the local precinct. Those men have connections, resources. Webb was former military intelligence. He knows how to disappear, how to manipulate systems. We need to go straight to the FBI. I have contacts there from the investigation. Ryan nodded. Okay, we can do that. But not tonight. Why not? Because you're in shock. Because neither of us is thinking clearly, and because we need to be strategic about this. He ran a hand through his damp hair, thinking it through. Right now they're panicking. They just lost their hostage. They left evidence all over that warehouse, and they know the clock is ticking. Panicked people make mistakes. If we go to the FBI tonight, sure, they'll protect you. But Webb and his guys will scatter. They'll disappear into the wind, and you'll spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder. Victoria's eyes narrowed. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we let them think they still have a chance, let them make more mistakes. Then we bring in the cavalry with enough evidence to put them away for good. That's risky. Life's risky, Ryan said. But you hired me the second you screamed for help. Now let me do my job. She stared at him for a long moment, and he could see her turning it over in her mind, weighing probabilities and outcomes with the same precision she probably used to make business decisions. Finally, she nodded. Okay, but I have one condition. Name it. If this goes wrong, if they find us, you run. You get out and you save yourself. You have a daughter to think about. Ryan felt his chest tighten. How did you... Victoria gestured to the living room and Ryan followed her gaze. There, on the bookshelf next to the TV, was a framed photo of Emma. 7 years old, gap-toothed smile, holding up a drawing she'd made of the two of them. He'd forgotten it was there. It was such a permanent fixture in his life that he didn't even see it anymore. She's beautiful, Victoria said softly. She needs her father. She does, Ryan agreed. But right now, you need someone too. And I don't run. Not from this, not from anything. The conviction in his voice surprised even him. But it was true. For 5 years he'd been running, from his past, from his pain, from the man he used to be. Tonight, kicking down that warehouse door, fighting those men, saving Victoria, it was the first time in half a decade that he'd felt like himself again. Like the version of Ryan Hale who'd worn the uniform and run into burning buildings and believed he could make a difference. He wasn't about to give that up. Victoria's expression softened. You're a good man, Ryan Hale. I'm really not. Yes, she said firmly. You are. And I'm going to make sure you don't regret helping me. Before Ryan could respond, his phone rang. The sound was so sudden and jarring in the quiet apartment that they both jumped. Ryan pulled it from his pocket, checked the screen, and felt his stomach drop. Emma. No, not Emma. His mother-in-law, Linda, calling from Emma's phone. At 1 a.m. His hands went numb. I have to take this. Victoria nodded, her face pale, and Ryan answered. Linda? What's wrong? Is Emma okay? Ryan, thank God. Linda's voice was tight with worry. Emma's fine, she's fine, but something happened. A man came to the house about an hour ago. He said he was looking for you, that it was urgent. I told him you weren't here, and he left, but Ryan, he scared me. The way he looked at Emma when she came to the door. Ryan's blood turned to ice. What did he look like? Big, bald. He had a scar on his neck. She paused. Ryan, what's going on? Who was that man? Marcus Webb. They'd found him. They'd found his home. And they'd found his daughter. Ryan's vision tunneled. The phone felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Across from him, Victoria had gone completely still, her eyes wide with horror because she could see it on his face, could see the exact moment his world shattered. Linda, Ryan said, and his voice was someone else's, cold, controlled, deadly calm. I need you to listen to me very carefully. Lock all the doors and windows. Don't let anyone in. Don't answer the phone unless it's me. I'm coming to get Emma right now. Ryan, you're scaring me. Good. Be scared. And keep my daughter safe until I get there. He hung up before she could respond, his mind already racing through logistics. Linda's house was upstate, about 2 hours away on a good night. In this weather, with his truck's broken rear window and the very real possibility that Webb's people were watching the roads, 3 hours, maybe more. 3 hours was an eternity. Ryan, Victoria's voice cut through his spiral. We need to call the FBI, right now. They can protect your daughter. I can protect my daughter, Ryan snapped, then immediately regretted it when he saw her flinch. He took a breath, forced himself to think. You're right, we need help. But first, I need to move you somewhere safe. Forget about me. I'm not going to forget about you. They went after my daughter because of you, because I helped you, which means they'll come back for you too. Ryan stood, ignoring the protest from his ribs. I have a friend, Pete, runs a motel about 20 miles from here. Doesn't ask questions, doesn't keep records on computers. I can get you there, get you hidden, then go get Emma and bring her back. Once we're all together, we call in the FBI and end this. Victoria stood too, and despite being 5 inches shorter and dressed in his oversized clothes, she somehow looked formidable. Absolutely not. You're not leaving me in a motel while your daughter is in danger. We go together. That's not negotiable? She stepped closer, her voice sharp with authority. Ryan, you saved my life tonight. You risked everything for a complete stranger. The least I can do is be there when you need backup. Besides, she added, something almost like a smile touching her lips, I'm the one they're after. If they find me with you, maybe they'll leave your daughter alone. Or maybe they'll kill us all. Then we'd better make sure they don't find us. Ryan wanted to argue, wanted to put her in his truck, drive her to Pete's motel, lock her in a room, and throw away the key. But the look in her eyes told him that wasn't going to happen. Victoria Langford hadn't become a billionaire CEO by backing down when things got dangerous. And God help him, he understood that. Fine, he said, but when I say run, you run. When I say hide, you hide. You follow my lead, no questions, no arguments. Deal? Deal. They moved fast after that. Ryan grabbed his keys, a baseball bat from the hall closet he'd given away his crowbar at the warehouse, and the emergency go bag he'd kept from his firefighting days. Water bottles, first aid kit, flashlights, energy bars. The kind of thing you hoped you'd never need but couldn't afford to be without. Victoria found a jacket, one of his old department-issued coats, way too big for her, and pulled it on. She looked ridiculous and determined and scared and brave all at once. Ready? Ryan asked. No, but let's go anyway. They descended the stairs to the garage, and Ryan's mind was already 3 steps ahead, planning routes and contingencies. If Webb's people were smart, they'd be watching the main highways. So they'd stick to back roads, maybe cut through. He stopped. His truck sat in the garage exactly where he'd left it. But something was wrong. The air felt different, thicker. Ryan? Victoria whispered. He held up a hand for silence, listening. There. A shuffle of movement from the far corner near the tool cabinets. Someone was here, someone was waiting. Ryan's grip tightened on the baseball bat. Beside him, Victoria pressed against his back, and he could feel her rapid breathing. Every instinct screamed at him to protect her, to put himself between her and whatever danger was lurking in his own garage. I know you're there, Ryan called out, his voice echoing off the concrete walls. Come out where I can see you. For a moment, nothing. Then, slowly, a figure emerged from the shadows near the workbench. It wasn't Marcus Webb. It was the third man from the warehouse, Knucklecracker, the one Ryan had fought hand to hand. His face was a mess, nose clearly broken, one eye swollen shut. Blood caked his shirt. And in his hand was a knife, 8 inches of steel that caught the fluorescent light and gleamed with violent promise. You broke my fucking nose, the man said, his words slurred by pain and rage. Ryan pushed Victoria behind him. Yeah, well, you tried to kill me. I'd say we're even. Not even close. The man took a step forward, favoring his left leg. Ryan had hurt him, but not enough. Not nearly enough. Webb wants the woman. You give her to me. Maybe I let you live. Maybe you get to see your little girl again. The mention of Emma sent a spike of pure fury through Ryan's chest. You go near my daughter, and I will end you. That's not a threat. That's a promise. The man laughed, a wet, ugly sound. Big talk for a guy with a baseball bat. I got a knife, and Webb's got your address. Face it, hero, you lost. Maybe. Ryan shifted his weight, balancing on the balls of his feet, the bat held loose in his hands. Or maybe you're the one making mistakes. What mistakes? Coming here alone. The man's eyes narrowed. I'm not. Ryan moved. He didn't wait for the man to finish his sentence, didn't give him time to call for backup or realize his error. Ryan closed the distance in 3 long strides and swung the bat in a controlled arc aimed not for the head, but for the knife hand. Wood connected with bone with a crack that made Victoria gasp. The knife clattered to the concrete floor. The man howled and lunged, but Ryan was already moving again, using momentum and physics instead of strength. He sidestepped, brought the bat around low, and swept the man's legs. He went down hard, his injured nose hitting the concrete with a sound that would haunt Ryan's nightmares. Victoria, Ryan said, not taking his eyes off the prone figure. Rope. On the shelf behind you. She found it, thank God for his obsessive need to keep his workspace organized, and together they bound the man's wrists and ankles. He was barely conscious, groaning through his broken face, but Ryan didn't feel an ounce of sympathy. This man had threatened his daughter, had come to his home with a knife. Some lines, once crossed, couldn't be uncrossed. "What do we do with him?" Victoria asked, her voice shaking slightly. Ryan pulled out his phone and made a decision he probably should have made hours ago. He dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? This is Ryan Hale, 347 Industrial Way. I have an intruder in my garage, armed with a knife. He's been subdued but needs medical attention. I'm holding him for the police. The dispatcher's voice was calm, professional. Officers are on the way, Mr. Hale. Are you injured? No, but I need you to do something for me. Ryan glanced at Victoria, then at the man on his garage floor. I need you to contact the FBI. Tell them it's related to the Marcus Webb case and the abduction of Victoria Langford. Tell them she's alive and needs immediate protection. A pause. Sir, can you repeat that? Victoria Langford, CEO of Langford Industries. She was kidnapped tonight by Marcus Webb and Associates. I got her out, but they're coming after both of us. One of them is on my garage floor. The others are still out there, and they've threatened my 7-year-old daughter. He could hear typing on the other end, fast, urgent typing. Mr. Hale, stay on the line. Officers are 3 minutes out, and I'm patching you through to the FBI field office right now. Thank you. Ryan looked at Victoria, who was staring at him with an expression somewhere between shock and admiration. I thought you wanted to wait, she said. That was before they went after Emma. Ryan's voice was hard. Now I'm going to make sure they never threaten anyone I care about ever again. The next 3 minutes stretched into hours. Ryan stayed on the line with the FBI, giving them everything: the warehouse location, descriptions of Webb and his accomplices, the names Victoria provided from her investigation, the make and model of the vehicles he'd seen in the parking lot. He held nothing back. When the police arrived, 3 squad cars, lights flashing, they found Ryan and Victoria sitting on his truck's tailgate, the bound man groaning nearby, and a story that sounded too crazy to be true. But the FBI agent who arrived 15 minutes later, a sharp-eyed woman named Martinez, who'd worked Victoria's original case, confirmed every word. Ms. Langford, Martinez said, her relief evident. Thank God you're alive. We've had every available agent looking for you since your driver called in the kidnapping 4 hours ago. Victoria blinked. 4 hours? But I told you, no one knew. Your driver is former Secret Service. When you didn't show up at the car within 2 minutes of your scheduled departure time, he initiated emergency protocols. He's in the hospital with a concussion, but he's alive. And he gave us enough information to start tracking Webb's known associates. Martinez turned to Ryan. Mr. Hale, what you did tonight was incredibly brave and incredibly stupid. You're lucky to be alive. Yeah, well, Ryan said tiredly, stupidity seems to be my specialty lately. Martinez allowed herself a small smile. We're going to need statements from both of you. And Mr. Hale, we're sending a team to your mother-in-law's house right now to secure your daughter. Ryan felt something in his chest unclench. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Webb is still in the wind and he's angry. He's going to come after you both. We can offer protective custody. No, Ryan and Victoria said simultaneously. They looked at each other, surprised. I have a business to run, Victoria said. 40,000 employees counting on me. I can't just disappear. And I have a daughter to protect, Ryan added. I'm not hiding from these guys. I'm going to make sure they can't hurt anyone else. Martinez sighed. I figured you'd say that. All right, we'll do this your way, but you're both getting protective details. Round-the-clock surveillance. And if Webb so much as sneezes in your direction, you call me immediately. She handed them each a card with her direct number. I mean it. These guys are dangerous. Trust me, Ryan said, touching his bruised ribs. I noticed. The next hour was a blur of statements and photographs and evidence collection. The man from Ryan's garage, who turned out to be named Dennis Cole, ex-Marine with a dishonorable discharge and a rap sheet longer than Ryan's arm, was taken away in an ambulance under police guard. The warehouse was secured as a crime scene, and Webb's face was plastered on every law enforcement database in the country. By the time the sun started to rise, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that felt obscene after the violence of the night, Ryan and Victoria found themselves sitting in the back of an FBI vehicle, heading upstate to get Emma. Victoria had fallen asleep against the window, exhausted beyond the ability to stay awake any longer. Ryan watched her, this woman he'd known for less than 6 hours, who'd somehow become tangled up in his life in ways he couldn't begin to unpack. She was beautiful, he realized. Not in the polished, untouchable way of magazine covers, but in a real human way. Vulnerable and strong and complicated. And she'd thanked him for seeing her as human. What kind of life had she lived where that was remarkable? His phone buzzed. A text from Linda. Emma's okay. FBI is here. She thinks it's exciting. God help us all. Ryan smiled despite everything. Of course Emma thought it was exciting. That was his daughter, fearless to a fault, finding adventure in disaster. She got that from him. He just hoped she'd forgive him for bringing danger to her doorstep. Ryan? Victoria's voice was soft, sleep rough. She'd woken up without him noticing. What are you thinking about? My daughter. How I'm going to explain all this to a 7-year-old? Victoria was quiet for a moment. Then, tell her the truth. That her father is a hero who helps people when they need it most. She'll understand. I'm not a hero. You are to me. Ryan looked at her, really looked at her, and saw something in her eyes that made his breath catch. Gratitude, yes, but something else too. Something that felt dangerous in an entirely different way. Victoria, I know, she said quietly. Wrong time, wrong place, wrong everything. But I wanted you to know. What you did tonight, saving me, protecting me, believing me when you had no reason to, that matters. You matter. She reached across the seat and took his hand, and Ryan didn't pull away. They sat like that as the sun rose higher and the city gave way to suburbs, gave way to the rolling hills where Linda's house waited. Two people who'd survived the impossible, bound together by violence and choice, and something neither of them was ready to name yet. But it was there. And as the FBI vehicle pulled into Linda's driveway and Ryan saw Emma burst out the front door, her face lighting up at the sight of him, he realized something that should have terrified him, but didn't. His life had just changed forever. And for the first time in 5 years, he was okay with that. Emma hit him like a cannonball, all 7 years and 50 pounds of her launching off the porch steps and into his arms before he'd even fully stepped out of the vehicle. Ryan caught her on instinct, his ribs screaming in protest, but he didn't care. He buried his face in her hair, smelling like the strawberry shampoo Linda always bought, and held on like she might disappear if he let go. Daddy! Emma's voice was muffled against his shoulder. Grandma said bad men came to the house, and the FBI came, and there's agents everywhere, and it's like a movie, but she wouldn't let me talk to them, and I wanted to help, but... Emma, baby, breathe. Ryan pulled back just enough to look at her face. No fear there, just excitement and indignation at being left out of the action. His daughter, the fearless one. Are you okay? Did anyone scare you? The bald man was kind of scary, Emma admitted. He smiled all wrong, like when the villain pretends to be nice in cartoons. But Grandma made me go inside and she called you, and then the police came and... She stopped, her eyes going wide as she noticed Victoria emerging from the vehicle behind Ryan. Who's that? Ryan set Emma down carefully, keeping one hand on her shoulder. Victoria stood a few feet away, looking uncertain in a way he hadn't seen before. The powerful CEO, who'd faced down kidnappers with steel in her spine, suddenly seemed nervous about meeting a 7-year-old. Emma, this is Victoria, Ryan said. She's a friend. She's the reason all this happened, but she's also the reason I came home safe. Emma studied Victoria with the kind of intense, unblinking scrutiny that only children could manage. Victoria bore it well, though Ryan saw her shift her weight slightly. Finally, Emma nodded, apparently satisfied with whatever she'd seen. Did you help my dad beat up the bad guys? Emma asked. Victoria blinked, clearly not expecting that question. Well, your dad did most of the beating up. I mostly just ran very fast. Running smart, Emma said seriously. Dad always says the best way to win a fight is not to be in one. Your dad is very wise. He's also very stubborn. This from Linda, who appeared in the doorway looking about 10 years older than she had the last time Ryan had seen her. His ex-wife's mother had never particularly liked him, thought Sarah could have done better, probably wasn't wrong, but she loved Emma fiercely, and that had always been enough to maintain a civil relationship. Right now, though, her eyes were hard as they fixed on Ryan. Inside. All of you. Now. The FBI agents who'd accompanied them did a quick perimeter check while Ryan, Victoria, and Emma followed Linda into the house. It was the kind of home that appeared in furniture catalogs. Everything coordinated, nothing out of place, the faint smell of lavender potpourri in the air. Ryan had always felt vaguely uncomfortable here, like he might break something just by existing too loudly. Linda directed Emma to her room. "Pack some things, sweetheart. Enough for a week," and waited until the girl was out of earshot before turning on Ryan with the full force of her maternal fury. "What in God's name have you gotten my granddaughter involved in?" "Linda, I'm sorry. Sorry." Her voice cracked like a whip. "Men with guns came to my house, Ryan. My house. Where your daughter was sleeping, where I was supposed to keep her safe, and now there are FBI agents in my driveway telling me she can't come back here for the foreseeable future because there's a credible threat against her life." I know, and if you say you're sorry one more time, I swear to God." Linda pressed her fingers to her temples, breathing hard. "Sarah would be devastated. Do you understand that? Her baby girl in danger because you decided to play hero." The mention of Sarah, his ex-wife, Emma's mother, dead 3 years from cancer that had eaten through her too fast for medicine to stop, hit Ryan like a physical blow. He'd spent those final months watching the strongest person he knew fade away, helpless to do anything but hold her hand and lie about everything being okay. He'd made her a promise, right at the end, that he'd keep Emma safe no matter what. And now he'd broken it. "You're right," Ryan said quietly, and the words tasted like ash. "Sarah would be furious with me. Emma deserves better than this. But I can't change what happened, Linda. All I can do is make sure she's protected going forward." "And how exactly do you plan to do that? By keeping her with you while psychotic criminals hunt you down?" "By making sure they can't hunt anyone." Victoria's voice cut through the tension, calm and authoritative. Linda turned to look at her properly for the first time, taking in the borrowed clothes and the bruise on her cheek and the quiet steel in her posture. "Mrs. Brennan, my name is Victoria Langford. The men who threatened your granddaughter work for me, used to work for me. They're criminals who stole from my company and are now seeking revenge for being caught. I take full responsibility for putting Emma and Ryan in danger." Linda's eyes narrowed. "Langford Industries?" "Yes, ma'am. I've seen you in the news, that big trial." Understanding dawned on Linda's face, followed quickly by a new kind of anger. "You're telling me my granddaughter is collateral damage in your corporate warfare?" "I'm telling you that I will use every resource at my disposal to ensure she stays safe," Victoria said firmly. "Money, lawyers, private security, whatever it takes. The men responsible will be caught and prosecuted. Ryan saved my life last night, and I intend to spend the rest of mine making sure he doesn't regret it." The two women stared at each other, and Ryan had the distinct feeling he was watching something he didn't fully understand. Some kind of communication that happened without words, the way his firefighter crew used to be able to read each other in the middle of a blaze. Finally, Linda nodded once, sharp. "There's a safe house," she said, addressing Ryan now. "FBI offered to move us all there until this is resolved. Emma and I would go to one location, you and Miss Langford to another." "No," Ryan shook his head. "Emma stays with me." "Ryan, she stays with me, Linda. I'm her father. I'm not shipping her off while I deal with this. She's already lost her mother. She's not losing me too, even temporarily. You're putting her in more danger." "I'm keeping her where I can protect her." Ryan's voice was firm. "The FBI can secure wherever we're staying. But Emma and I don't separate. That's non-negotiable." Linda looked like she wanted to argue, but something in Ryan's expression must have convinced her it would be pointless. She sighed, suddenly looking very tired. "Fine, but I'm staying close. If anything happens to that little girl—" "It won't," Ryan and Victoria said simultaneously. Linda glanced between them, something unreadable flickering across her face. "Right. Well, I'll go help Emma pack." She disappeared down the hallway, leaving Ryan and Victoria alone in the too-perfect living room. Ryan sank onto the couch, exhaustion finally catching up with him. Every muscle ached. His ribs were definitely cracked, and his brain felt like it had been put through a blender. Victoria sat beside him, maintaining a careful distance. "You didn't have to take responsibility like that," Ryan said. What happened isn't your fault. Isn't it? Victoria's voice was quiet. I'm the one who pushed for prosecution. I could have just fired them, let them disappear. But I wanted justice. I wanted them to pay for what they'd stolen. She laughed bitterly. Turns out justice has a price tag I didn't anticipate. They stole $50 million, and God knows how much in trade secrets. You did the right thing. Did I? Because right now, a 7-year-old girl can't sleep in her own home because of choices I made. Ryan turned to look at her. The morning light coming through Linda's pristine windows caught the exhaustion in Victoria's face, the weight she was carrying. Webb and his people made their choices. They chose to steal, chose to kidnap you, chose to threaten my daughter. You're not responsible for their actions any more than I'm responsible for Sarah's cancer. He paused. Bad things happen. All we can do is decide how we respond to them. Victoria met his eyes. Is that what you told yourself? After the fire? Ryan shouldn't have been surprised she'd figured it out. She was too observant, too smart not to have pieced together his story from context clues. Something like that. Did it help? Not really, but saying it out loud made other people feel better, so I kept doing it. Ryan ran a hand through his hair. Truth is, I spent 5 years believing I should have died in that fire instead of the men who did. Spent 5 years wondering if I was a coward for surviving. And then last night, I kicked down a door and fought 3 men and got you out alive. And for the first time since the collapse, I felt like maybe I deserved to still be breathing. The words hung in the air between them, raw and honest and more than Ryan had intended to say. But Victoria didn't look away, didn't offer empty platitudes or try to fix him. She just nodded, like she understood exactly what he meant. My father built Langford Industries from nothing, she said quietly, worked himself into an early grave doing it. When he died and left it to me, everyone expected me to fail. The board, the shareholders, the media, they all thought I was too young, too soft, too female to run a manufacturing empire. So I worked twice as hard, made twice as many sacrifices, proved myself over and over until I could barely remember who I was before I became the CEO. She looked at her hands. Last night, tied to that chair, I kept thinking this was it. This was the price I'd paid for success. And I was angry, but I wasn't surprised, because some part of me has always believed I'd have to give up everything, my safety, my relationships, my humanity, to keep the company alive. That's not... And then you kicked down the door, Victoria continued, a slight smile touching her lips. This complete stranger who had absolutely no reason to risk his life for me, who looked at me like I was just a person who needed help, not a symbol or a challenge or a prize to be won. You didn't know who I was, didn't know what I was worth, and you came anyway. She turned to face him fully. That matters, Ryan. More than you know. Before Ryan could respond, Emma appeared in the doorway, dragging a pink backpack that looked like it weighed almost as much as she did. I'm ready, she announced. I packed my tablet and 3 books, and my stuffed turtle, and 7 days of clothes, and my toothbrush, and... Did you pack any actual food? Ryan asked, standing. Emma looked offended. Dad, there's food everywhere. You can't pack food. Fair point. Linda followed Emma out, carrying a smaller bag and wearing an expression that said she was deeply unhappy about all of this, but had accepted the inevitable. Agent Martinez appeared at the front door, looking professional and alert despite having been up all night. We've secured a location in the suburbs, Martinez said. 3 bedrooms, full security system, agents posted outside 24/7. It's not permanent, but it'll keep you safe while we track down Webb and the others. How long do you think that'll take? Victoria asked. Hard to say. Could be days, could be weeks. Webb has resources and experience. He won't be easy to find. Martinez's expression was grim. But we will find him. These guys always make mistakes when they're desperate. They made the move in a convoy of black SUVs that screamed federal agents here to anyone paying attention. Emma thought it was the coolest thing ever, asking 100 questions that the agents deflected with practiced ease. Linda sat rigid and silent, her disapproval radiating off her in waves. And Victoria stared out the window, lost in thoughts Ryan couldn't begin to guess at. The safe house was in one of those suburban developments where every house looked vaguely identical. Beige siding, green lawns, 2-car garages, completely anonymous, which was exactly the point. Inside it was furnished like a hotel, Functional, but impersonal. Emma immediately claimed the bedroom with the best view, dragging her backpack upstairs while Linda followed to help her unpack. Ryan and Victoria stood in the living room, surrounded by FBI agents doing security sweeps and installing additional cameras. It felt surreal, like they'd stepped into someone else's life. 24 hours ago, Ryan had been closing up his garage, thinking about whether to open that bottle of whiskey. Now he was in witness protection with a billionaire and his 7-year-old daughter, waiting for violent criminals to be caught. Mr. Hale, Martinez approached with a tablet. I need to brief you on the security protocols. Anytime you or your family leave the house, you notify us first. No exceptions. No solo trips to the store. No going for walks. Nothing. If you need something, we get it for you. Understood? Ryan nodded. What about Emma's school? She'll need to stay home for now. We can arrange for online classes if... No! Emma's voice came from the stairs, where she'd apparently been eavesdropping. She descended with the kind of dramatic flair only a 7-year-old could pull off. I'm not missing school. We're learning about the solar system, and I'm supposed to present my project on Jupiter next week, and I already made the poster. Em, it's not safe. You said the FBI would keep us safe. You said we'd be okay. Emma crossed her arms, looking so much like Sarah in that moment that Ryan's chest hurt. I'm not hiding. You taught me to be brave. Being brave doesn't mean being stupid, Ryan said, but his conviction was wavering. Emma had a point. What kind of lesson was he teaching her if he told her to cower in fear? Actually, Martinez said slowly, it might work. Webb and his associates are looking for you and Ms. Langford. They might not expect you to maintain normal routines. And the school has security. We could coordinate with local police, post agents nearby. You can't be serious, Linda said, having appeared behind Emma. You want to use my granddaughter as bait? Not as bait, but maintaining some normalcy might be beneficial for Emma's mental health and for the investigation. Martinez looked at Ryan. Ultimately, it's your call. Ryan looked at his daughter, who was staring at him with those huge brown eyes, silently begging him to trust her. He thought about the past 5 years, how he'd wrapped both of them in bubble wrap, terrified of losing anyone else. He thought about Sarah, who would have told him to let Emma live her life. And he thought about last night, about kicking down that door, about choosing action over fear. Okay, he said. But I drive her, I pick her up, and there's an agent with us at all times. Emma's face lit up like Christmas morning. Really? Really? But you follow every rule, Em. Every single one. You stay where the teachers can see you, you don't talk to strangers, and if anything feels wrong, you find an adult immediately. Deal? Deal! She launched herself at him again, and this time Ryan was ready for it. He caught her and held on, making a silent promise to Sarah's memory that he'd keep their daughter safe no matter what it took. The rest of the day passed in a strange limbo of forced normalcy. Emma did homework at the kitchen table while FBI agents rotated shifts outside. Linda made dinner, pot roast, because of course she did, while shooting suspicious glances at Victoria. And Victoria herself made phone calls to her company, trying to run a $12 billion empire from a suburban safe house while avoiding the media circus that had erupted around her kidnapping. Ryan heard fragments of her conversations as he helped Emma with her math homework. Victoria's voice was different on the phone, colder, more controlled, the armor she'd let slip around him snapping firmly back into place. She was the CEO again, making decisions that affected thousands of lives, and he was reminded that the woman who'd slept in his borrowed clothes was only one version of her. It was disorienting. Night fell. Emma went to bed after extracting promises that she could really, truly go to school tomorrow. Linda retired to her room, still radiating disapproval. And Ryan found himself alone with Victoria in the living room, the house quiet except for the occasional radio chatter from the agents outside. You should rest, Victoria said. She was curled up in the corner of the couch, still in his oversized clothes, looking small and tired. You've been up for over 30 hours. So have you. I'm used to it. Running a company means you learn to function on no sleep. She smiled faintly, though usually the exhaustion comes from board meetings, not being kidnapped. Ryan sat in the chair across from her. Can I ask you something? Anything? Why didn't you get married? Have kids? You're what, 35? Successful, smart, beautiful? He caught himself. Sorry, that was inappropriate. No, it's fine. It's a fair question. Victoria pulled her knees up to her chest, looking younger than her years. I was engaged once. His name was David. We met in business school, fell in love, planned this whole future together. But after my father died and I took over the company, everything changed. I was working 100 hours a week, traveling constantly, making impossible decisions. David wanted me to step back, let someone else run things, prioritize our relationship. She paused. I couldn't do it. The company was my father's legacy. 40,000 employees counted on me. So David left, and I told myself it was for the best, that some people are meant for love and family, and others are meant for different kinds of success. It is, Victoria agreed quietly, but it's the choice I made, and until last night, I thought I was okay with it. What changed? She looked at him, really looked at him, and Ryan felt something shift in the air between them. Something electric and dangerous and entirely too complicated given the circumstances. You did. You changed things. Victoria, I know, wrong time, wrong place, wrong everything. You have a daughter and a life, and I have a company and responsibilities. This, whatever this is, can't happen. She stood abruptly, wrapping her arms around herself. I should go to bed. Tomorrow's going to be complicated. She was at the stairs before Ryan found his voice. Victoria, wait! She stopped but didn't turn around. For what it's worth, Ryan said, I think David was an idiot. Victoria's shoulders shook slightly. It took Ryan a moment to realize she was laughing. Good night, Ryan. Good night. She disappeared upstairs, and Ryan sat alone in the dark living room, wondering how his life had become so impossibly complicated in less than 24 hours. The next morning arrived too soon, bringing with it chaos and carefully organized security protocols. Emma bounced downstairs at 6 a.m., already dressed in her school uniform and ready to go. Linda made breakfast with tight-lipped efficiency, and Victoria emerged looking like she'd stepped off a magazine cover despite having only the clothes Ryan had lent her, somehow making sweatpants look boardroom appropriate. The drive to Emma's school was tense. Ryan white-knuckled the steering wheel of the FBI-provided SUV while two agents followed in a second vehicle. Emma chattered nervously in the back seat, and Victoria sat in the passenger seat, silent and alert. The school was a cheerful building painted in primary colors, surrounded by the kind of secure fence that made parents feel better while doing absolutely nothing to stop actual threats. Kids swarmed the playground, their laughter cutting through the morning air. It looked so normal, so innocent, that Ryan almost believed everything would be okay. Almost. Remember the rules, Ryan said as Emma unbuckled her seatbelt. Stay where the teachers can see you. Don't talk to strangers. If anything feels wrong, find an adult immediately. I know, Dad. You've told me like 100 times. Emma leaned forward to kiss his cheek. I'll be fine. I'm braver than you think. I know you are. That's what terrifies me. Emma grinned and hopped out of the SUV. Ryan watched her run to join her friends, his heart in his throat, until she disappeared into the building. Only then did he let himself breathe. She'll be okay, Victoria said quietly. You're teaching her to live without fear. That's important. Or I'm teaching her to be reckless. There's a difference between recklessness and courage. Emma knows which one she's choosing. Ryan pulled out of the school parking lot, hyper-aware of the FBI vehicle trailing them. The plan was to return to the safe house, where Victoria could work remotely and Ryan could pretend he wasn't slowly losing his mind with worry. But as they drove through the suburban streets, Ryan noticed Victoria staring at her phone with increasing frustration. Problem? He asked. The board is calling an emergency meeting. They want to discuss my fitness to lead in light of recent events. Victoria's voice dripped with disdain. Translation: they smell blood in the water and want to use my kidnapping as an excuse to push me out. Can they do that? They can try. I control 51% of the voting shares, so technically no, but they can make my life hell and damage the company's reputation in the process. She rubbed her temples. I need to be there. Need to face them directly. Martinez said no public appearances. I know what Martinez said, but if I don't show up, if I let them see me as weak, I'll lose everything my father built, everything I've worked for. Victoria looked at him, and there was fire in her eyes now. I'm not hiding, Ryan. Not from Webb, not from my board, not from anyone. Ryan understood that feeling, had felt it himself last night when he'd decided to fight instead of run, but understanding didn't make the decision any less dangerous. When's the meeting? This afternoon, at the downtown office. That's suicide. Webb could have people watching the building, which is why I'll have FBI protection, and why I'll be walking in through the front door with my head held high, showing everyone that I'm not afraid. Victoria's jaw set in a way Ryan was beginning to recognize meant there was no arguing with her. I'm doing this, Ryan, with or without your approval. Then you're doing it with me there, Ryan said. Someone needs to watch your back. You're not negotiable, Ryan said, echoing her words from last night. You want to walk into danger? Fine. But I'm walking in with you. Victoria stared at him for a long moment, then nodded. Okay, but we do this smart. FBI escort, secure routes, everything by the book. Agreed. They spent the next several hours planning with Martinez, who was about as thrilled with this development as Ryan expected. But Victoria was right. She couldn't hide forever, and showing strength now might actually help the investigation by forcing Webb to make a move. At least, that's what Ryan told himself as he put on the only suit he owned, bought for Sarah's funeral and never worn since, and checked the concealed carry permit the FBI had expedited for him. The weight of the Glock 19 on his hip felt foreign and familiar at the same time. Another ghost from his firefighter days when he'd trained with weapons, just in case. Victoria emerged from a room in a suit that someone from her company had couriered over, and she looked every inch the powerful CEO. Hair perfect, makeup flawless, the bruise on her cheek expertly concealed. She was breathtaking and terrifying, and Ryan realized this was what she showed the world, the unshakable titan of industry. But he'd seen her soaked and shaking in his apartment, had held her hand while she confessed her loneliness, and knowing both versions of Victoria Langford felt like a privilege he hadn't earned. Ready? She asked. Ryan thought about Emma at school, about Linda waiting at the safe house, about Webb somewhere out there with a gun and a grudge. He thought about all the ways this could go wrong, all the dangers they were walking into. No, he said honestly. But let's do it anyway. The convoy to Langford Industries' downtown headquarters was a production worthy of a presidential motorcade. 3 SUVs, 2 marked police vehicles, plainclothes agents scattered throughout nearby buildings. They entered through the parking garage, and even that felt like walking into a trap, concrete pillars providing 1,000 places for an ambush. But nothing happened. They made it to the elevator, made it to the executive floor, made it all the way to the boardroom door without incident. Last chance to back out, Ryan murmured. Victoria squared her shoulders. I don't back out. She pushed open the door and Ryan followed her into a room full of suits and egos and barely concealed hostility. The boardroom was all glass and steel and implied power, with a view of the city that probably cost more than Ryan made in a decade. 12 people sat around an enormous conference table, and every one of them looked up when Victoria entered. The temperature in the room seemed to drop about 10 degrees. Gentlemen, Victoria said, her voice cool and controlled. I understand you have concerns. An older man at the head of the table, silver hair, expensive watch, the kind of tan that came from golf courses and beach houses, leaned back in his chair. Victoria, we're relieved you're safe, of course, but given recent events, we need to discuss the company's leadership structure. Do we, Richard? Because from where I'm standing, recent events prove exactly why I'm the right person to lead this company. Victoria moved to her seat at the table with the kind of confidence that made even the hostile board members shift uncomfortably. I was targeted because I refused to let criminals steal from us, because I insisted on accountability and justice. If that makes me unfit to lead, then I'm not sure what qualifications you're looking for. It's not about your principles, another board member, younger, hungry-looking, interjected. It's about risk management. You've made yourself a target, which makes the entire company a target. Share prices dropped 3% when news of your kidnapping broke. Our insurance premiums are going to skyrocket. We have a responsibility to our shareholders. I am the majority shareholder, Victoria said sharply, and I'm not stepping down because a few criminals decided to seek revenge. That's not how leadership works. Ryan stood by the door, watching this play out, and felt distinctly out of his depth. This was a different kind of battlefield than he was used to, where the weapons were words and the casualties were careers. But he could read the room well enough to know that Victoria was outnumbered, and they knew it. Richard cleared his throat. No one is suggesting you step down permanently, just that perhaps you should take some time to recover from your ordeal. Let the executive team handle day-to-day operations while you focus on your safety. Translation: let you run the company while hoping I never come back. Victoria's smile was razor sharp. I appreciate the concern, Richard, but I'm not interested in being managed out of my own company. Then perhaps we should put it to a vote. You can vote all you want. I control 51% of shares. Unless you plan to stage a coup, which I'm sure our legal team would find fascinating, this conversation is over. Victoria stood, gathering her papers. I'm back. I'm in charge. And anyone who has a problem with that can clean out their office today. The room erupted in protests and arguments, but Victoria was already moving toward the door. Ryan followed, his hand instinctively moving toward the weapon at his hip as they stepped into the hallway. Behind them, he could hear Richard calling for order, but Victoria didn't look back. That went well, Ryan said dryly once they were safely in the elevator. Victoria's hands were shaking. Now that the performance was over, the adrenaline was crashing, and Ryan saw the fear she'd been hiding. They want me gone. They've always wanted me gone. But you didn't give them an inch. That was... Ryan searched for the right word. Impressive. Terrifying. Possibly insane. Welcome to my world. Victoria leaned against the elevator wall, suddenly looking exhausted. Every day is a fight to prove I belong. Every decision is scrutinized. Every mistake is ammunition for people who want to see me fail. Sounds lonely. It is. She looked at him. But less so lately. The elevator doors opened before Ryan could respond, depositing them back into the parking garage where the FBI agents waited. Martinez approached with a satisfied expression. That was bold, Ms. Langford. Potentially reckless, but bold. We had eyes on the building the whole time. No sign of Webb or his associates. Maybe they finally gave up, Victoria said, but even she didn't sound convinced. They made it back to the safe house without incident, arriving just in time for Ryan to pick up Emma from school. His daughter emerged chattering about her day, oblivious to the danger that surrounded them, and Ryan was grateful for that innocence even as he mourned its inevitable end. That night, after Emma was in bed and Linda had retreated to her room, Ryan found Victoria on the back porch. She'd changed back into his borrowed clothes, the CEO armor discarded, and was staring up at the stars with an expression he couldn't read. You okay? He asked, joining her. Define okay. Victoria didn't look at him. I'm alive, my company is still mine, and no one died today. That's probably the best I can hope for at this point. That's a pretty low bar. Welcome to my life. She finally turned to face him. Ryan, I need to tell you something. The seriousness in her tone made his stomach tighten. What? The FBI found footage from a traffic camera near the warehouse. They identified two of Webb's associates, brothers named Tommy and Jack Reeves, career criminals, both of them dangerous, and they're still out there. Victoria's voice was steady, but he could hear the fear underneath. Martinez thinks they'll come after me again. Webb won't stop until he gets what he wants. Which is? Revenge, control, to prove he can. Victoria wrapped her arms around herself. I've destroyed his life, cost him his freedom, his reputation, his future. He's not going to just walk away. Ryan thought about the man he'd fought in his garage, about the cold calculation in Webb's voice when he'd mentioned Emma. No, he won't. They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of that truth settling over them. I should leave, Victoria said suddenly. Take the FBI protection and disappear somewhere until they catch him. You and Emma would be safer without me here. Probably, Ryan agreed, but you're not going anywhere. Ryan, you said it yourself. Webb won't stop, which means the only way to end this is to catch him, and the only way to catch him is to give him a target. Ryan turned to face her fully. You're not running, and neither am I. We're going to end this, together. Victoria's eyes glistened in the moonlight. Why? Why are you doing this? You don't owe me anything. Ryan thought about that, about the scream he'd heard through the rain, about the choice he'd made to kick down that door, about the way Victoria had looked at him like he was something more than a broken-down mechanic with too many regrets. "Because someone needed help," he said finally. "And because for the first time in 5 years, I feel like I'm doing something that matters." "You matter," Victoria said fiercely. "Not because of what you do or who you save, just because you're you. I need you to know that." "Victoria," she kissed him. It wasn't gentle or tentative. It was fierce and desperate, and tasted like fear and hope, and all the impossible feelings they'd been dancing around since that first moment in the warehouse. Ryan froze for half a second, his brain short-circuiting, and then he was kissing her back, his hands coming up to frame her face, pouring 5 years of loneliness and pain and longing into this one perfect, terrible moment. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Ryan rested his forehead against hers. "This is a bad idea." "Terrible idea," Victoria agreed. "You're a billionaire CEO. I'm a mechanic with a kid and more baggage than an airport. Completely incompatible. We should stop." "Definitely should stop." Neither of them moved. "Tomorrow," Victoria whispered. "We'll figure everything out tomorrow. But tonight, can we just—" "Yeah," Ryan said. "We can." They stood there on the porch, holding each other under the stars. Two broken people finding something like healing in the last place either of them expected. And for that one moment, the danger and the fear and the impossible complexity of their situation faded away, leaving just this, just them. Just the possibility that maybe, against all odds, they'd both found something worth fighting for. The moment shattered when Ryan's phone buzzed in his pocket, the vibration harsh against the quiet intimacy they'd built. He pulled back reluctantly, saw Martinez's name on the screen, and knew before he answered that the fragile peace was over. "Hail," he said, his voice rougher than he intended. "We've got movement." Martinez's tone was clipped, professional. Traffic cameras picked up a vehicle registered to Jack Reeves circling the block about 20 minutes ago. "He's gone now, but he knows where you are." Ryan's blood went cold. "How? This was supposed to be secure." "We're looking into it. Could be a leak. Could be they followed us from the school. Could be they're just checking every safe house location they can find. Either way, we're moving you. Pack light and fast. We leave in 15 minutes. The line went dead. Ryan looked at Victoria, who'd gone pale in the moonlight, having heard enough to understand what was happening. "They found us," she said. "Yeah." "Emma is about to have the adventure of her life, whether she wants it or not." Ryan was already moving, his mind shifting into the tactical mode that had kept him alive through burning buildings and collapsing structures. "Get your things. Only what you absolutely need. We travel light from here." Inside, the house erupted into controlled chaos. FBI agents swept through rooms, checking windows and securing perimeters while Martinez coordinated on her radio. Linda appeared in her bathrobe, face drawn with fear that she was trying to hide behind anger. And Emma stood at the top of the stairs in her pajamas, clutching her stuffed turtle and looking far too awake for someone who should have been asleep. "Are we leaving?" she asked, her voice small. Ryan climbed the stairs to kneel in front of her, bringing himself to her eye level. "Yeah, baby. We've got to go somewhere else for a little while. Think of it like camping, except in a house." "Will there be bad men where we're going?" The question hit Ryan like a physical blow. Emma wasn't stupid. She'd heard things, seen things, understood more than he'd given her credit for. The innocence he'd been trying so hard to preserve was already cracking around the edges. "I won't let anyone hurt you," Ryan said, which wasn't an answer, but was the only promise he could make. "Your dad's really good at keeping people safe. It's what I used to do for a living, remember?" "Before the fire." "Yeah, before the fire." Ryan touched her cheek. "But I still remember how, and I've got a whole team of FBI agents helping me. You're the most protected 7-year-old in the entire country right now." Emma considered this, her child's mind working through probabilities and fears that no kid should have to calculate. Finally, she nodded. "Can I bring my Jupiter poster? I worked really hard on it." "Absolutely. Pack it careful, okay?" She disappeared into her room, and Ryan stood, his leg aching from the crouch. Victoria was waiting at the bottom of the stairs with a single bag, having somehow managed to look pulled together despite the circumstances. Linda stood beside her, arms crossed, vibrating with barely contained fury. "This is insane," Linda hissed. "You're dragging my granddaughter from place to place like she's a fugitive." "She's a target," Ryan said flatly. "And until Webb is caught, anywhere we stay is temporary. I don't like it any more than you do, but this is the reality we're living in." "Then maybe you should have thought about that before you played hero." Linda's voice cracked slightly. "Sarah trusted you to keep Emma safe, Ryan. What would she think about all this?" The words were designed to cut, and they hit their mark perfectly. Ryan felt the guilt, always there, always waiting, surge up to choke him. Sarah would have been horrified by this situation, would have probably divorced him all over again, just on principle. But Sarah was gone, and he was doing the best he could with impossible circumstances. "She'd think I was doing whatever it took to protect our daughter," Ryan said quietly. Same as she always did. Linda opened her mouth to argue, but Victoria stepped between them. "Mrs. Brennan, I understand you're angry. You have every right to be. But directing that anger at Ryan isn't going to help Emma. He saved my life, and now he's trying to save hers. The least we can do is support him. I don't recall asking for your input. I'm giving it anyway." Victoria's voice had that steel edge again, the CEO making decisions and expecting to be obeyed. "We're all scared. We're all exhausted. But we need to work together, because the alternative is unthinkable. So you can either help, or you can stay behind with an FBI detail and let Ryan do what needs to be done. Your choice." The two women stared at each other, and Ryan had the distinct feeling this was about more than just the current crisis. This was about control and trust and the complicated dynamics of a family held together by a child and a ghost. Finally, Linda looked away. "I'm coming, but if anything happens to Emma—" "It won't," Ryan and Victoria said in unison, and the synchronicity of it seemed to surprise them both. Emma reappeared with her backpack and the carefully rolled Jupiter poster, looking more excited than scared now that the initial shock had worn off. Kids were resilient that way, able to find adventure in disaster, to adapt to circumstances that would break adults. They moved out in a convoy again, this time heading west toward a location that Martinez wouldn't reveal until they were already en route. The city lights blurred past the windows, and Ryan kept checking the mirrors, looking for any sign of pursuit. Beside him, Victoria sat rigid in the passenger seat, her phone in her hand but the screen dark. Not working for once, just present. "Where do you think they'll take us?" she asked quietly. "Somewhere remote, harder to find, easier to defend." Ryan took another turn following the lead vehicle. "Martinez is good at her job. She won't let Webb get close." "But he will get close eventually. They always do." Ryan glanced at her. "You sound like you've got experience with this kind of thing." "My father had enemies. Business rivals, disgruntled employees, people who thought they deserved what he'd built. We had security my whole childhood, bodyguards who drove me to school, background checks on anyone I wanted to be friends with, panic rooms in every house we owned." Victoria's laugh was bitter. "I spent my entire life being protected from people who wanted to hurt me because of my last name, and I told myself when I took over the company that I wouldn't live that way, that I'd be different, more accessible, more human. Turns out that was naive." "It wasn't naive, it was brave." Brave gets you kidnapped and zip-tied to a chair. Brave also gets you rescued by a mechanic with boundary issues and a hero complex. Ryan reached over and took her hand. "You're still here, Victoria. That counts for something." She squeezed his fingers. "So are you." In the back seat, Emma had fallen asleep against Linda's shoulder, clutching her turtle. Linda met Ryan's eyes in the rearview mirror, and something passed between them. Not forgiveness exactly, but maybe understanding. They were both doing their best in an impossible situation, both trying to honor Sarah's memory by keeping Emma safe. It would have to be enough. They drove for over an hour, leaving the city behind for rural highways and eventually dirt roads that led into dense forest. The safe house, when they finally reached it, was less a house and more a fortified cabin. Small, isolated, surrounded by trees that would make approach difficult and escape easier. Generators for power, well water, enough supplies to last weeks if necessary. It looked like the kind of place where people went to disappear. Welcome to your new home, Martinez said as they pulled up. I know it's not much, but it's secure. We've got agents posted at every access point, cameras on all approaches, and enough firepower to hold off a small army. Comforting, Victoria murmured. They unloaded quickly, Martinez's team moving with practiced efficiency. Emma woke up long enough to be carried inside, mumbling something about Jupiter before falling back asleep in one of the bedrooms. Linda claimed another room without comment, her exhaustion finally overcoming her anger. And Ryan and Victoria were left in the main living area, surrounded by rustic furniture and the kind of silence that only exists in the middle of nowhere. I'll take the couch, Ryan said, eyeing the worn sofa that looked like it predated the Clinton administration. There's another bedroom, with one bed, which you're taking. I've slept in worse places. Ryan dropped his bag and moved to the window, checking the sight lines. Force of habit. Besides, I won't sleep anyway. Might as well be somewhere I can see the door. Victoria studied him for a long moment. You're going into protection mode. Is that a problem? No, just an observation. She moved closer, and Ryan was suddenly very aware of how small the cabin was, how intimate the space felt despite the circumstances. On the porch, before the call, was a mistake, Ryan said, though the words felt like a lie even as he spoke them. You were scared. I was there. Emotions were running high. It doesn't have to mean anything. And if I want it to mean something? Ryan turned to face her fully. Then you're not thinking clearly. Victoria, you're a billionaire CEO. When this is over, you're going back to your boardrooms and your empire. I'm going back to my garage and my life. We exist in completely different worlds. Worlds that collided 3 days ago when you kicked down a warehouse door. Exactly. Collided. Past tense. Once Webb is caught, once you're safe, those worlds go back to their separate orbits. Ryan ran a hand through his hair, frustrated with himself for wanting things he couldn't have. I've got a daughter to think about, Victoria. A life I've built that's small and manageable and safe. I won't disrupt that for something that can't possibly work. Victoria's expression was unreadable. You're protecting yourself. I'm being realistic. You're terrified. She stepped closer, and Ryan found himself backed against the window. You're terrified that if you let yourself feel something real, you might lose it, like you lost Sarah, like you lost your firefighter brothers. So you keep everyone at arm's length and tell yourself it's for their protection, when really it's for yours. The words hit too close to home. Ryan felt his defenses slam into place, the walls he'd spent 5 years building suddenly feeling very necessary. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? I've spent my entire adult life doing the exact same thing, keeping people away, telling myself it's because of the company or my responsibilities, when the truth is I'm just as scared as you are. Victoria's voice softened. But here's the thing, Ryan, I've been scared for 35 years, and it hasn't kept me safe. It's just kept me lonely, and I'm tired of being lonely. Victoria, I'm not asking you to marry me or upend your life. I'm just asking you to stop pretending that what's happening between us doesn't exist. She reached up and touched his face, her fingers gentle against his jaw. We can figure out the logistics later. We can worry about different worlds and complications and all the very good reasons this won't work. But right now, in this moment, can we just be honest about what we feel? Ryan closed his eyes, fighting against every instinct telling him to push her away to protect himself from the inevitable pain of loss. But God, he was tired too, tired of being alone, tired of going through the motions of a life he didn't really live, tired of being the ghost of the man he used to be. I feel like I'm standing on the edge of a cliff, he said quietly, and I don't know if jumping means I'll fly or fall. Then let's find out together. She kissed him again, and this time Ryan didn't hesitate. He pulled her close, his hands tangling in her hair, pouring all his fear and hope and desperate longing into the kiss. It was different from the porch, less desperate, more intentional. A choice they were both making with open eyes. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Ryan rested his forehead against hers. This is still a terrible idea. The best ones usually are. They stood there in the quiet cabin, holding each other, and for that moment the danger outside felt very far away. But reality had a way of intruding, and it did so in the form of Martinez's radio crackling to life. All units, we've got movement on the eastern perimeter. Single vehicle, approaching slowly. Ryan and Victoria sprang apart. Ryan's hand went automatically to the weapon at his hip, while Victoria moved toward the bedroom where Emma slept. Martinez appeared at the front door, her own weapon drawn, her face grim. Could be nothing, she said. Could be a lost hiker. But we're not taking chances. Everyone stays inside, away from windows. The next 10 minutes felt like hours. Ryan positioned himself between the front door and the bedrooms, his body a shield whether anyone asked for one or not. Victoria stood beside him, her fear palpable but her spine straight. And somewhere in the back of the cabin, Emma slept on, oblivious to the danger circling closer. The radio crackled again. Vehicle stopped about a quarter-mile out, headlights off. Someone's approaching on foot. Ryan's jaw tightened. How many? Can't tell yet. IR shows heat signatures, but the tree cover is making it hard to get an accurate count. Every second stretched impossibly long. Ryan's mind raced through scenarios and contingencies, calculating distances and angles, remembering training from a lifetime ago. If Webb's people breached the cabin, he'd have maybe 30 seconds to get Emma and Victoria out the back. The woods would provide cover, but they'd be exposed, vulnerable. He'd need to, "Stand down! Stand down!" Martinez's voice was sharp with relief. "It's a park ranger. Apparently we're parked in a restricted area, and he's here to issue a citation." The tension in the cabin deflated so quickly it was almost comical. Ryan let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding, and Victoria actually laughed, a slightly hysterical sound that she quickly smothered. "A park ranger," she said. "We were ready to go to war over a park ranger." "Better paranoid than dead," Martinez said, holstering her weapon. "But yeah, that was fun. I'll go explain to him why there are heavily armed federal agents camping illegally in the state forest." She disappeared outside, leaving Ryan and Victoria alone again. The adrenaline was still singing through Ryan's veins, making his hands shake slightly. He'd been ready to fight, ready to kill if necessary to protect the people in this cabin. The realization was sobering. "You okay?" Victoria asked. "Yeah. You?" Terrified and relieved in equal measure. She moved to the couch and sank down, suddenly looking exhausted. How long can we live like this? Jumping at every sound, ready to run at a moment's notice? Until Webb is caught. And if he's not? If he's smart enough to stay hidden for months? Years? Victoria looked at him. "I can't put your daughter through years of this, Ryan. I can't be the reason Emma grows up scared. You're not the reason. Webb is. Webb wouldn't be after you if you hadn't saved me. And I'd do it again," Ryan said firmly. "Victoria, stop trying to take responsibility for other people's choices. You didn't kidnap yourself. You didn't threaten my daughter. You're the victim here, not the villain." "I don't feel like a victim. I feel like a curse." Ryan sat beside her on the couch. "You know what I see when I look at you? I see someone who built an empire, who stood up to criminals even when it would have been easier to look away, who walked into a hostile boardroom with a bruise on her face and dared them to question her strength. You're not a curse, Victoria. You're the bravest person I've ever met." "You barely know me." "I know you well enough." Ryan took her hand. "I know you take your coffee black. I know you have this habit of tucking your hair behind your ear when you're nervous. I know you cry when you think no one's watching, and you smile like it's a weapon when you think someone is. I know you're lonely and scared and trying so hard to be strong that you've forgotten it's okay to be weak sometimes." Victoria stared at him, her eyes glistening. "How do you see all that?" "Because I recognize it. It's the same thing I see in the mirror every morning." She leaned against him then, her head on his shoulder, and they sat in the quiet darkness of the cabin while FBI agents patrolled outside and Emma slept peacefully down the hall. It felt stolen, this moment of peace, like they were borrowing time from a future that might never come. But it was real. And Ryan was learning that sometimes real was enough. The next morning arrived gray and cold, the forest wrapped in mist that made visibility terrible and everyone's nerves worse. Emma woke up asking about school, and Ryan had to explain that online classes were starting today instead. She took it better than expected, mainly because Victoria offered to help with her Jupiter presentation. Watching Victoria and Emma work together at the cabin's small table, Victoria's business acumen applied to planetary facts, Emma's enthusiasm infectious even in crisis. Ryan felt something shift in his chest. This wasn't just about protecting Victoria anymore. It wasn't even just about keeping Emma safe. It was about the possibility of something more. Something that looked almost like family. The thought terrified him. Linda appeared mid-morning, having apparently decided that silent treatment was preferable to open hostility. She made coffee and toast, offering Victoria some with a civility that felt forced but genuine. Small steps toward something that might eventually be acceptance. Martinez called around noon with an update. "We've got a lead on Tommy Reeves. Security footage from a gas station shows him fueling up about 50 miles from your previous location. He was alone, paid cash, and was heading north." "Toward us or away from us?" Ryan asked. "Hard to say. But the FBI is coordinating with state police to set up checkpoints. If he's still in the area, we'll find him." "And Webb?" "Still ghost. But with Tommy potentially exposed, Webb might make a mistake trying to extract him." Martinez paused. "How's everyone holding up?" Ryan looked around the cabin. Emma was giggling at something Victoria said about Jupiter's great red spot. Linda was actually smiling into her coffee cup, and Victoria looked more relaxed than he'd seen her since the warehouse. "We're managing," Ryan said. "Good. Stay sharp. I'll update you when we know more." The afternoon passed in a strange domesticity. Victoria worked remotely when she could get signal, fielding calls from her executive team and making decisions about acquisitions and supply chains like she wasn't hiding in a cabin in the woods. Emma did her schoolwork with surprising diligence, occasionally asking Victoria questions about business that made Ryan realize his daughter had inherited more than just Sarah's eyes. And Ryan cleaned his weapon, checked the perimeter, and tried not to think about all the ways this fragile piece could shatter. It shattered at dusk. Ryan was outside checking the generator when he heard the first gunshot. It came from the eastern perimeter, sharp and unmistakable in the quiet forest. He was moving before his brain fully processed the sound, sprinting back toward the cabin while his hand closed around his weapon. "Get inside! Everyone inside now!" More gunshots. Automatic fire this time, the distinctive chatter of an assault rifle. Ryan's blood turned to ice. FBI agents were returning fire, their voices sharp on the radios. And somewhere in that chaos, his daughter was in danger. He burst through the cabin door to find Victoria already moving, grabbing Emma from the table. Linda was frozen by the kitchen counter, her face white with shock. And outside, the battle was intensifying. "Back bedroom now!" Ryan shouted. "Victoria, take Emma and Linda. There's a root cellar under the floor. I'm not leaving you. You are. Because if they get past me, you're Emma's last line of defense." Ryan pressed his spare magazine into her hand. "You remember what I showed you yesterday?" Victoria nodded, her face pale but determined. She'd asked him to teach her the basics last night while Emma slept. He'd thought it was paranoia. Now he was grateful for it. "Safety's here. Point and shoot. Don't hesitate." Ryan looked at Emma, who was crying now, finally understanding this wasn't an adventure. "Baby, you go with Victoria. She's going to keep you safe." "Daddy, I love you, Em, so much. Now go." Victoria pulled Emma toward the back bedroom, Linda stumbling after them. Ryan watched them disappear, then turned toward the front door. Martinez's voice crackled over the radio. "We've got at least 4 shooters, maybe more. They're using the trees for cover." An explosion cut off her words. The cabin shook, and Ryan realized with dawning horror that Webb hadn't come to kidnap Victoria this time. He'd come to end this permanently. Ryan moved to the window, staying low, and risked a glance outside. The FBI vehicles were disabled, one of them burning. He could see agents taking cover behind trees, trading fire with shadows in the forest. And approaching through the smoke, backlit by flames, was a figure Ryan recognized even at a distance. Marcus Webb. He was carrying what looked like an AR-15, moving with the confidence of someone who'd done this before. Former military intelligence, Martinez had said, which meant he was trained, experienced, and very, very dangerous. Ryan checked his Glock. 17 rounds. Against Webb and at least 3 others, all with superior firepower. Not great odds, but Ryan Hale had never been good at backing down from bad odds. He moved to the door, took a breath, and made a decision that would either save everyone he loved or get him killed. He stepped outside. Webb! Ryan's voice cut through the gunfire. You want someone to blame? I'm right here. Let's finish this. The shooting stopped. The sudden silence was deafening. Webb turned toward the cabin, and even from 50 yards away, Ryan could see the cold smile on his face. The hero, Webb called back. I was hoping you'd do something stupid. Seems to be my specialty. Ryan kept his weapon lowered but ready. Your problem is with me, not them. Let's make a deal. You're not in a position to make deals. Sure I am. You want revenge? You want to prove something? Here I am. Take your shot. But you let the women and the kid go. They didn't do anything except be in the wrong place. Webb laughed, a sound devoid of humor. You really think you're noble, don't you? The white knight saving the damsel, but you're just a fool who got involved in things he doesn't understand. He raised his rifle. I'm going to kill you first. Then I'm going to kill Victoria. Then I'm going to burn this whole place down, and no one is going to remember any of you existed. Maybe, Ryan said. Or maybe you're about to make the last mistake of your life. He dove sideways just as Webb fired, the bullet hitting the doorframe where Ryan's head had been a second earlier. Ryan rolled, came up firing, his shots forcing Webb back into cover. The forest erupted again, gunfire from multiple directions, and Ryan stopped thinking in words. He just moved. Training took over, the muscle memory of 100 drills, the instincts honed in burning buildings and life-or-death situations. Ryan used the terrain, used the smoke, made himself a difficult target while laying down covering fire for the FBI agents. He couldn't win this fight, but he could buy time, could keep Webb's attention on him instead of the cabin, could protect what mattered. A bullet caught his shoulder, spinning him around. The pain was white-hot and immediate, but Ryan kept moving. He dove behind a tree, assessed the damage, through and through, still had function, and kept firing. His magazine ran empty. He reloaded with shaking hands, his shoulder screaming. You're hit! Webb's voice was mocking. How's it feel, hero, knowing you're about to die and it won't change anything? Ryan didn't answer. He was counting bullets, counting shooters, trying to find the angle that would end this. Webb was behind a thick oak, effectively untouchable, but his associates were more exposed, and if Ryan could take them out, an engine roared to life. Ryan turned to see one of the FBI SUVs, damaged but operational, come tearing around the cabin. Martinez was driving, her face set with determination, and she aimed the vehicle directly at Webb's position. Webb saw it coming too late. He tried to move, but the SUV clipped him, sending him flying. His rifle went spinning into the underbrush. The other shooters, seeing their leader down, broke and ran. It was over in seconds. FBI agents swarmed the area, securing weapons and suspects. Martinez jumped out of the SUV and ran to Ryan, who'd slumped against his tree, his shoulder bleeding freely now. You're an idiot, she said, but her hands were gentle as she checked his wound. A brave idiot, but an idiot. Is he alive? Barely. We'll get him to a hospital and then to a federal prison where he'll spend the rest of his life. Martinez pressed gauze to Ryan's shoulder. You did good, Hale. Stupid, but good. Ryan let his head fall back against the tree. Emma, Victoria, are they safe? They're safe. The adrenaline drained out of him all at once, leaving behind pain and exhaustion, and a relief so profound it brought tears to his eyes. He'd done it. Somehow, against all odds, he'd kept them safe. Victoria appeared moments later, pushing past FBI agents, Emma in her arms. They were both crying. Both looked terrified and relieved and perfect. Victoria dropped to her knees beside Ryan, Emma still clinging to her, and for a moment they just looked at each other. You're hurt, Victoria said, her voice breaking. I'm alive. We're all alive. You could have died. You walked out there and did what I had to do. Ryan reached up with his good hand to touch her face. It's over, Victoria. Webb's caught. You're safe. She kissed him then, hard and desperate, not caring that FBI agents were watching, or that Emma was squirming between them, or that Ryan was bleeding all over the forest floor. She just held him and kissed him like he was the most precious thing in the world. And for that moment, bleeding and exhausted and surrounded by the aftermath of violence, Ryan Hale felt something he hadn't felt in 5 years. He felt whole. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and bad coffee. a combination that brought back too many memories Ryan would have preferred to keep buried. He sat on the edge of an examination table while a doctor, too young to have this much responsibility, in Ryan's opinion, stitched up the bullet wound in his shoulder with the kind of casual efficiency that suggested this wasn't his first gunshot patient of the week. "You're lucky," the doctor said, not looking up from his work. "Another inch to the right, and this would have shattered your collarbone. As it is, you're looking at 6 weeks of physical therapy and a scar that'll impress people at parties." "I don't go to parties," Ryan said. "Then you'll have a great story nobody gets to hear." The doctor tied off the last stitch and stepped back to admire his handiwork. "Keep it clean, change the dressing daily, and for God's sake, don't do anything heroic for at least a month. Your body needs time to heal." Ryan nodded, though they both knew he'd probably ignore that advice the second something needed doing. The doctor left, and Ryan was alone with his thoughts for about 30 seconds before Emma burst through the door, Victoria right behind her. "Daddy!" Emma launched herself at him, then stopped short when she remembered he was injured. "Does it hurt?" "Not too bad," Ryan lied. "It hurt like hell, actually, a deep, throbbing ache that painkillers barely touched. But Emma didn't need to know that. "How are you doing, baby? That was pretty scary back there." Emma climbed carefully onto the table beside him, her small face serious in a way that made her look far older than 7. "I thought you were going to die. Like Mommy did." The words hit Ryan harder than the bullet had. He wrapped his good arm around her, pulling her close. "I know, I'm sorry you had to see that. Sorry you had to be scared. Victoria said you were being brave. That brave people get scared too. But they do the right thing anyway." Emma looked up at him with Sarah's eyes. "Were you scared?" "Terrified," Ryan admitted. "But I couldn't let anything happen to you. You're the most important thing in my whole world." "More important than Victoria?" Ryan glanced at Victoria, who was standing by the door with an expression that was carefully neutral. "Different kind of important," he said carefully. "You're my daughter. I'd do anything for you. Victoria is—" He hesitated, not sure how to explain something he didn't fully understand himself. "Victoria is someone very special to me." Emma studied Victoria with the kind of intense scrutiny only children could manage. "Are you going to be my new mom?" Victoria's eyes went wide. That's not—" "Emma, your dad and I are just—" "Friends," Ryan supplied, though the word felt inadequate. "Very good friends." Mom used to say that grown-ups call people friends when they really mean something else. Emma was nothing if not perceptive. She said that's because grown-ups are scared of words. "Your mom was a smart lady," Victoria said softly, moving closer. "And she was right. Sometimes grown-ups are scared of words because words make things real, and real things can hurt." "But they can also be good," Emma countered, "like pizza, or birthdays, or—" She gestured between Ryan and Victoria. "Whatever this is," Ryan couldn't help but smile. "When did you get so wise?" "I've always been wise. You just don't listen." Emma yawned, the adrenaline crash finally hitting her. "Can we go home now? The real home, not the cabin or the safe house. I want to sleep in my own bed." "Soon," Ryan promised. "Martinez says we can go back in a few days, once they've processed all the evidence and made sure there aren't any more threats. Then we'll go home, and things can go back to normal." Even as he said it, Ryan knew it was a lie. Nothing would ever be normal again. Too much had changed. Too much had been exposed. You couldn't unring a bell, and you couldn't pretend you hadn't found something precious just because it was complicated. Linda appeared in the doorway, looking exhausted but relieved. "The FBI cleared us to go to a hotel for the night, somewhere with actual beds and room service. Emma, you ready to go?" Emma slid off the table, gave Ryan a careful hug, and followed her grandmother out. Victoria moved to close the door behind them, and suddenly the room felt very small and very quiet. "She asked a good question," Victoria said finally. "What are we, Ryan?" "Honestly, I have no idea." Ryan flexed his injured shoulder, wincing. 3 days ago, I was a mechanic with a simple life. Now I'm— "What? The guy who saved a billionaire and caught feelings in the process?" "Is that what happened? You caught feelings?" Victoria's voice was light, but there was something vulnerable underneath it. "You know I did. You'd have to be blind not to see it. Ryan met her eyes. But that doesn't change the reality of our situations. You've got a company to run, a life in boardrooms and corporate jets. I've got a garage and a 7-year-old and a very small world that works precisely because it's contained. Those things don't mix, Victoria. Maybe they don't have to mix. Maybe they can just coexist. Victoria sat beside him on the examination table. I'm not asking you to give up your life. I'm just asking you to let me be part of it. For how long? Until the novelty wears off and you remember you're a billionaire who can have anyone? Until you realize that dating a single dad with PTSD and a bullet wound is a lot less romantic in reality than it seemed in the moment? Is that really what you think of me? Victoria's voice was quiet, hurt. That I'm that shallow? No, God, no. Ryan turned to face her fully, ignoring the pain in his shoulder. I think you're incredible. I think you're brilliant and brave and more than I deserve. But I also think you're used to a world where problems can be solved with money and determination, and this isn't that kind of problem. This is messy and complicated, and there's a little girl involved who's already lost one parent. I won't let her get attached to someone who might not stay. What makes you think I won't stay? Because nobody does, Ryan said, and there it was, the truth he'd been avoiding. Sarah left even though she didn't want to. My firefighter brothers left. Everyone I've ever cared about has left, one way or another. So forgive me if I'm not jumping at the chance to hand you my heart and trust you'll stick around when things get hard. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady, but her eyes were bright with unshed tears. You're right. I can't promise I'll stay forever. Nobody can promise that. Life is uncertain, and people leave, and sometimes the worst things happen to the best people. But I can promise that I won't leave because things get hard. I won't leave because your life is complicated, or your daughter has needs, or you wake up screaming from nightmares about fires. I'll leave. If I leave because we genuinely don't work, not because I didn't try. Victoria, I spent my entire life putting the company first, putting my father's legacy first, putting everything and everyone ahead of what I wanted, what I needed, because that's what good CEOs do. They sacrifice. She took his hand. But you know what I learned when I was tied to that chair, thinking I was going to die? I learned that legacies don't keep you warm at night. Success doesn't hold your hand when you're scared. And all the money in the world doesn't mean a damn thing if you're alone. Ryan's throat was tight. What are you saying? I'm saying I don't want to be alone anymore. I'm saying that when you kicked down that door, you didn't just save my life. You reminded me that I have a life worth saving, worth living, and I want to live it with you if you'll let me. Not perfectly, not without complications, but honestly. Really. Victoria squeezed his hand. So stop trying to protect me from yourself and just tell me what you want. What did he want? Ryan had spent 5 years not wanting anything beyond making it through another day. Had convinced himself that wanting things was dangerous, that hope was a weapon that would eventually be used against him. But sitting here in this sterile hospital room, his shoulder aching and his heart racing, he realized that somewhere in the chaos of the past few days, hope had snuck back in, and it terrified him, but it also felt like breathing after being underwater for too long. I want you to stay, Ryan said quietly. I want to see where this goes, even though it scares the hell out of me. I want Emma to know you, to see what it looks like when someone chooses to be in our lives instead of being obligated. I want... He stopped, the words catching. I want to stop being so damn scared all the time. Victoria smiled, and it was the real smile. Not the CEO armor, not the polished veneer, but the genuine article that made her whole face light up. I can work with that. She kissed him, soft and gentle, careful of his injury. And Ryan kissed her back, letting himself feel everything he'd been holding at arm's length. The fear was still there, would probably always be there, but underneath it was something else, something that felt almost like happiness. The door opened, and they sprang apart like guilty teenagers. Martinez stood in the doorway, looking amused. Sorry to interrupt, but we need to debrief while everything's still fresh. Also, the media's camped outside, and they're very interested in the story of the mechanic who saved the Billionaire CEO. You two want to make a statement? Ryan and Victoria looked at each other, and some unspoken communication passed between them. No, Victoria said firmly. This isn't a story for public consumption. This is private. The media is going to make up their own story if you don't give them one. Let them. I've spent my whole life worrying about optics and public perception. For once, I'd like to keep something just for me. Victoria stood, smoothing her borrowed clothes. Tell them I'm grateful to be alive, grateful to the FBI, and that I'm taking some personal time to recover. Ryan isn't available for comment because he's a private citizen who values his privacy. End of story. Martinez raised an eyebrow. You sure about that? This could be great PR for the company. Hero mechanic, dramatic rescue, the whole thing. I'm sure. Some things matter more than PR. After Martinez left, Ryan allowed himself to be checked over by one more doctor, signed approximately 7,000 forms, and was finally cleared to leave. They found Emma and Linda in a waiting room, Emma asleep across 3 chairs with her stuffed turtle, Linda scrolling through her phone with a frown. The news is already calling you mystery hero, Linda said to Ryan. There are photos from the cabin, though they're too grainy to identify anyone, and speculation about Victoria's relationship with her rescuer. She looked between them. I assume there's substance to that speculation? We're figuring it out, Ryan said carefully. Linda's expression was unreadable. Sarah would have had opinions. Sarah would have told me I was an idiot for getting shot, Ryan said. And then she would have made sure I was okay. And then she would have wanted to know everything about Victoria so she could judge whether she was good enough for me. He smiled sadly. I miss her. Every day. But she's gone, Linda, and I'm trying to figure out how to live in a world without her. Linda's eyes softened. She'd want you to be happy, Ryan, even if that happiness looked different than she imagined, even if, she glanced at Victoria, even if it complicated things. Everything's already complicated, Victoria said quietly. I'm just hoping to find some clarity in the mess. They collected Emma, who woke up cranky and confused, and made their way to an FBI-secured hotel on the edge of the city. It was nicer than anywhere Ryan had stayed in years, with real art on the walls and bathrooms larger than his entire apartment. Emma thought it was a palace. Linda thought it was excessive, and Victoria looked at it like it was just another hotel, which Ryan supposed it was for someone who flew first class. The next few days passed in a strange limbo of debriefings and recovery. Webb was officially charged with kidnapping, attempted murder, and about 15 other felonies that would keep him in federal prison for the rest of his natural life. His associates, Tommy and Jack Reeves, plus 2 others Ryan hadn't even seen, were similarly charged. The stolen equipment was recovered. The investigation into the broader theft ring was ongoing. Justice, slow and bureaucratic, was being served. And through it all, Ryan and Victoria navigated the impossible logistics of 2 lives that were trying to merge. Victoria had conference calls at ungodly hours, dealing with board members and executives who wanted to know when she'd be back in the office. Ryan had his own calls with his insurance company, his landlord, and the various people who'd been trying to reach him since he'd disappeared. Emma went back to online school, presenting her Jupiter project to a virtual class with enthusiasm that suggested she'd already moved past the trauma of armed gunmen. Kids were resilient that way. Adults, less so. Ryan woke up 3 nights in a row gasping from nightmares where he hadn't been fast enough, where Emma had been hurt, where everything went wrong in ways it hadn't. Victoria held him through it, whispering reassurances he half believed, her presence an anchor in the dark. And slowly, day by day, they built something that looked almost like normal. A week after the cabin, Martinez cleared them to go home. Real home, not safe houses or hotels. Emma cheered. Linda looked relieved, and Ryan felt something unclench in his chest that he hadn't realized was tight. The garage looked exactly as he'd left it, tools in their places, cars waiting for repairs, the apartment above untouched by the chaos that had consumed his life. It should have felt like a refuge. Instead, it felt small, confining, like a prison he'd built for himself without realizing it. It's cozy, Victoria said diplomatically, standing in his living room. It's tiny, Ryan corrected, and the water pressure is terrible, and the heat barely works in winter, and there's probably lead paint under the newer paint because this building is about 100 years old. But it's yours. Yeah, it's mine. Ryan looked around at the life he'd built. Small, contained, safe. Victoria, I don't know how this works. You and me. Your world is penthouse apartments and private jets. Mine is, he gestured around, this. So we figure it out. Maybe I spend weekends here. Maybe you and Emma come stay with me sometimes. Maybe we find something in between that works for both of us. Victoria moved closer. Ryan, I'm not asking you to change your life. I'm asking to be part of it. And your company? The board members who want you gone? The 40,000 employees? I'll handle them. I always do. Victoria smiled. I'm pretty good at my job, in case you hadn't noticed. I noticed. Emma appeared in the doorway, dragging her backpack and looking delighted to be home. Can Victoria stay for dinner? Grandma says she's going back to her house, and I don't want to eat alone with just you. You're boring. Thanks, baby. Love you too. So can she stay? Ryan looked at Victoria, who looked back with an expression that said the choice was his. And really, there was only one choice. Had been since the moment he'd kicked down that warehouse door. Yeah, Ryan said. She can stay. Emma cheered and disappeared into her room to unpack, and Ryan and Victoria stood in his tiny apartment, surrounded by the evidence of a life lived small, and both of them smiled like they'd won something. Over the next few weeks, they found a rhythm. Victoria came to the garage after work, sometimes bringing takeout, sometimes cooking in Ryan's terrible kitchen with equipment that was older than Emma. She met Ryan's handful of friends, other mechanics, guys from his firefighter days who'd tried to stay in touch, the woman who owned the diner down the street. And Ryan entered her world too, meeting executives and attending one truly terrible charity gala where he wore an ill-fitting tux and felt like an imposter the entire time. Neither world was perfect for either of them, but the spaces where they overlapped, quiet dinners with Emma, walks through the industrial district, nights spent talking until dawn, those spaces felt right, felt like home. Emma adapted with the kind of ease only children possessed. She liked Victoria, asked her questions about business and space and whether rich people really ate gold. Victoria answered with patience and humor, never talking down, never pretending to be something she wasn't. And slowly, carefully, they built something that looked almost like a family. Linda was slower to warm up, but even she had to admit that Victoria made Ryan happy in a way he hadn't been since Sarah died. And that counted for something. 2 months after the cabin, Victoria made Ryan an offer. They were sitting on his couch, Emma asleep in her room, the TV playing some documentary neither of them was watching. Victoria had been quiet all evening, clearly wrestling with something. Finally, she turned to face him. I want to offer you a job, she said. Ryan blinked. What? Head of Emergency Response for the Langford Foundation. It's a new initiative I'm launching, disaster relief, emergency preparedness training, coordination with first responders. I need someone who understands crisis management, who can build programs from the ground up, who has actual field experience. She paused. I need someone I trust. And I trust you. Victoria, I appreciate the offer, but I'm a mechanic. I fix cars, not empires. You fix what's broken, Victoria corrected. Cars, people, impossible situations. That's the skill set I need. And before you say no because you think I'm offering this out of obligation or guilt or whatever, let me be clear. This is a real job, with real responsibilities and a salary that'll let you hire someone to run the garage so you don't have to work 80 hours a week. So Emma can have her dad at school events and bedtime stories. So you can have a life that's bigger than this apartment. Ryan stared at her. You're serious? Completely. I've been planning this for weeks. The foundation is real. We've already allocated $50 million in funding. We're partnering with FEMA, with fire departments across the country, with disaster relief organizations. We can make a real difference, Ryan. We can save lives. And I want you to help me do it. It was everything Ryan had thought he'd given up when he left the fire department. Purpose. The ability to help people. A chance to do work that mattered. And Victoria was offering it to him on a silver platter, wrapped up with financial security and the promise of time with his daughter. It was too good to be true. What's the catch? Ryan asked. No catch, just a lot of work, some travel, and the need to occasionally wear a suit to meetings with government officials. Victoria's smile was wry. And you'd be working for me, which might complicate the personal relationship. But I think we can navigate that. You think? I hope. Victoria took his hand. Ryan, I'm not trying to fix you or save you or change your life without permission. I'm just trying to offer you an opportunity. If you want to stay here, keep running the garage, that's fine. I'll support that. But if you want more, if you want to do the work you were meant to do, then I'm giving you a chance. Ryan thought about the fire, about the 3 men who'd died while he lived, about 5 years spent hiding from the world because he couldn't face his own guilt. And he thought about Victoria, who'd somehow seen past all his defenses to the man he used to be, the man he might still be if he was brave enough to try. I'd need to think about it, Ryan said. Talk to Emma. Make sure this is the right move. Take all the time you need. But Ryan already knew his answer, had known it the second Victoria made the offer. Because this wasn't just about a job or money or getting back to the work he loved. This was about choosing to live again, about stepping out of the prison he'd built for himself and into a future that terrified and excited him in equal measure. This was about hope. He told Emma the next morning over breakfast. She listened carefully, asked if it meant they'd have to move, seemed relieved when he said no. Then she looked at him with those 2 wise eyes and asked the question that really mattered. Will this make you happy, Dad? I think it might, Ryan admitted. Then you should do it. Mom always said you were happiest when you were helping people. She said that's why you were a firefighter, because you needed to fix things. Emma took a bite of cereal. And Victoria needs fixing. Not like she's broken, but like she's been alone too long and needs someone to remind her she doesn't have to be. When did you get so smart? I told you. I've always been smart. You just don't listen. Ryan called Victoria that afternoon and accepted the job. Her relief was palpable, her excitement infectious. They started planning immediately, program structures, hiring needs, partnership agreements. Ryan found himself energized in a way he hadn't been in years, his mind spinning with possibilities. The garage he turned over to Pete, his oldest friend and most reliable mechanic, who'd been wanting to buy him out for years. Emma adjusted to having her dad around more, though she complained he was underfoot when she was trying to do homework. Linda grudgingly admitted that the change seemed good for him. And Victoria, who'd spent most of her adult life building walls around herself, slowly let them come down. 3 months after the warehouse, they went public with their relationship. Not with press releases or staged photos, but simply by existing together, attending Emma's school play, having dinner at normal restaurants, living their lives without hiding. The media had a field day at first, the mechanic and billionaire angle too good to resist. But when Ryan refused all interview requests and Victoria made it clear she wasn't interested in making her personal life entertainment, the story eventually died down. Some things were allowed to be private. 6 months after the warehouse, on a cold December evening, Ryan took Emma and Victoria to the memorial for his fallen firefighter brothers. It was the first time he'd been back since the funerals, and standing in front of those 3 names carved in stone, he felt the familiar guilt rise up to choke him. But this time, Victoria's hand was in his, and Emma was holding his other hand, and he wasn't alone with his grief anymore. I'm sorry I survived, Ryan said quietly, not sure if he was talking to the memorial, or the ghosts, or himself. I'm sorry I didn't save you. I'm sorry I spent 5 years being angry about it, but I think maybe I'm ready to stop being sorry and start living again, if that's okay. The stone didn't answer. The dead never did. But the wind picked up, cold and cleansing, and Ryan felt something shift in his chest. Not forgiveness, exactly. Not peace. But maybe the beginning of both. Emma squeezed his hand. They'd be proud of you, Dad, for saving Victoria, for being brave. You think? I know, because that's what heroes do. They save people even when they're scared. Ryan looked down at his daughter, this incredible little human who'd inherited her mother's wisdom and his stubbornness, and felt love so fierce it was almost painful. Then he looked at Victoria, who was crying silently, her face tilted up toward the weak winter sun, and felt something equally fierce but different. Not the desperate love of someone afraid to lose what they had, but the steady love of someone who'd chosen to stay. They'd chosen each other. Against all logic, against all odds, despite coming from completely different worlds, they'd chosen to try, to build something new from the wreckage of their old lives, to believe that broken people could heal each other if they were brave enough to try. It wasn't perfect. Victoria still worked too much, disappearing into conference calls and international trips. Ryan still woke up from nightmares sometimes, still had days where the guilt felt crushing. Emma still struggled with having lost her mother too young. Linda still didn't fully trust that Victoria would stick around. But they were trying. Every day they were trying. And slowly, that was becoming enough. A year after the warehouse, Victoria came to the garage at closing time carrying a bottle of champagne and wearing jeans Ryan had never seen her in. She looked younger like this, more relaxed, happy in a way that made his heart skip. "We need to celebrate," she announced. "Celebrate what?" "The Foundation's first major success. We coordinated relief efforts for that earthquake in California, got supplies and personnel there within 6 hours of the initial tremor. Saved an estimated 200 lives based on early intervention." Victoria set down the champagne and pulled out her phone, showing him photos of their team in action. "Ryan, we did this. The program you built, the training you implemented, the partnerships you forged, it all worked. We actually made a difference." Ryan looked at the photos, at his team working in the rubble, and felt something he hadn't felt since before the fire. Pride. Not the arrogant kind, but the quiet satisfaction of knowing his work mattered, that the skills he'd thought he'd lost forever were being used to help people. "We should toast," he said. They poured champagne into coffee mugs. The garage didn't run to champagne flutes, and stood in the middle of his workspace, surrounded by tools and oil stains and the evidence of lives built from nothing. "To second chances," Victoria said, raising her mug. "To brave choices," Ryan added, "to finding home in unexpected places." They drank, and the champagne was probably expensive enough to make Ryan nervous about drinking it from a mug, but it tasted like victory, like possibility, like everything they'd fought for and nearly lost and somehow managed to keep. Emma appeared in the doorway, back from Linda's house early. "Are you guys being mushy again? Because it's gross." "We're celebrating," Victoria said, pulling Emma into a hug that the girl pretended to resist but clearly enjoyed. "Your dad did something amazing." "Dad's always doing amazing things. He just forgets to notice." Emma wriggled free and grabbed the juice box Ryan kept stocked for her. "Can we order pizza?" "The good kind." "Not the healthy kind Victoria always tries to make us eat." "The healthy kind has vegetables." "Pizza shouldn't have vegetables. That's a rule." Emma was firm on this point. They ordered pizza. They ate it in the small apartment above the garage, the three of them squeezed onto Ryan's couch that was really only meant for two. They watched a movie Emma picked, something animated and loud that neither adult really followed, and when Emma fell asleep between them, her head on Ryan's lap and her feet in Victoria's, neither of them moved to wake her. "This is good," Victoria whispered. "Yeah," Ryan agreed. "It is. I never thought I'd have this. A family. People who wanted me around not because of what I could do for them, but just because." Victoria's voice was thick with emotion. "Thank you for letting me in. Thank you for kicking down my walls until I didn't have a choice." They sat in the quiet darkness, a makeshift family built from trauma and choice, and Ryan thought about the scream he'd heard through the rain a year ago. About the split-second decision to kick down that door, to get involved, to risk everything for a stranger. Best decision he'd ever made. Not because it led to love, though it had. Not because it gave him purpose, though it did. But because it reminded him that life was worth living. That broken people could heal. That sometimes the bravest thing you could do was let someone help you carry your pain. Emma stirred, mumbled something about Jupiter, and settled back into sleep. Victoria's hand found Ryan's, their fingers interlocking with the ease of practice. And outside, the city hummed with life and possibility and all the beautiful chaos of people trying to make it through another day. The warehouse felt like a lifetime ago. But it had only been a year. 1 year since Ryan Hale, broken-down mechanic with a hero complex, had heard a scream and decided to act. 1 year since Victoria Langford, Billionaire CEO, had learned that sometimes the most valuable things couldn't be bought. 1 year since two worlds collided, and against all odds, decided to build something new from the wreckage. It wasn't a fairy tale. There was no magical transformation, no perfect happy ending where all problems disappeared. Ryan still struggled with PTSD. Victoria still battled board members who wanted her gone. Emma still missed her mother. The world was still complicated and messy and frequently unfair, but they had each other. And most days, that was enough. Ryan looked down at Emma sleeping peacefully, then at Victoria watching them both with soft eyes, and felt something he'd thought he'd lost forever in the fire that took his brothers. Hope. Not the naive kind that believed everything would work out perfectly, but the hard-won kind that knew life was difficult and painful and full of loss, and chose to keep going anyway. The kind that said, yes, you might get hurt again, but the alternative, never trying, never risking, never living, was worse. The kind that whispered quietly but persistently that maybe broken people could find healing in each other's arms, that maybe the best things in life came from the moments when you chose courage over fear, that maybe, just maybe, some doors were worth kicking down. Emma shifted again, and this time her eyes opened. She looked up at Ryan, then at Victoria, then around at the small apartment that somehow held everything that mattered. "Dad?" she said sleepily. "Yeah, baby? I'm glad you saved her." Ryan's throat tightened. "Me too. Even though she tries to put vegetables on pizza?" "Even then." Emma smiled, satisfied, and closed her eyes again. And Ryan Hale, former firefighter, current mechanic, and reluctant hero, held his daughter close and let himself believe in second chances. Because sometimes, in the space between one heartbeat and the next, everything changed. Sometimes a scream in the rain led to a door being kicked down. And sometimes, if you were very lucky and very brave, that door opened onto a life worth living. Ryan had spent 5 years hiding from that life, convinced he didn't deserve it. But Victoria had seen past his walls to the man underneath. Emma had reminded him that being brave meant showing up even when you were scared, and together they'd built something that looked almost like home. Not perfect, but real. And in the end, that was what mattered most. Outside, rain began to fall, softer than the storm that had brought them together, gentler, like the world washing itself clean. Ryan listened to it ping against the windows and felt, for the first time in years, like everything might actually be okay. Not because the danger was gone, or the pain had disappeared, or the future was certain, but because he wasn't facing it alone anymore. Because he'd found people worth fighting for. Because he'd learned that sometimes the bravest thing you could do was let yourself be saved. The warehouse seemed very far away now, but its lessons remained. Some doors were worth kicking down. Some people were worth saving. And sometimes, when you least expected it, the act of saving someone else saved you right back. Victoria squeezed his hand. Emma breathed softly in sleep. And Ryan Hale, who'd once believed he'd lost everything worth having, realized he'd been wrong. He'd found something better. He'd found home.